Hello and welcome to For Future Generations, episode 28. It is the seventh day of the week. One might call it Sabbath, but that is a topic for another day. But the seventh day of the week. It is not Sunday. It is not the Lord's Day, my dudes. As per usual, we have moved the show to Saturday, and this is the result of polling, as we mentioned in the last show, but we appreciate those who are able to come along and be here for the Saturday show. We're going to see how this goes, but glad to have y'all along for the ride. It is the 9th of August, and hope y'all are having a wonderful day. My name is Jeffrey, and I am joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Sean. Sean, how are you, man?
Everything's good on this end. I'm excited to have our guest today, John Moody. It's been a long time I've been talking about having you on. John Moody is a professional John Piper impersonator. He was a homeless guy that I drove to the airport one time.
Larry David impersonator.
Yeah. That's a funny story because I had given John a ride one time and I was like, hey, I got to take a picture for the clout. Like I got to get some clout that I had a picture with you. And I had said, like, right before I took the picture, I had said something about, I'm going to tell everyone I picked up a homeless guy at the airport. And so I feel like I have the most genuine smile in a picture with John Moody. But John, if you want to go over, I know you do a lot of conferences as far as like productive households or homesteading, or I know you have different definitions of that. Just kind of give an overview of what exactly it is that you speak at conferences.
And do you have one coming up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's getting into that time of year. So I'm always amazed on podcasts and speak at conferences. I'm such just a normal average guy. So I have a wife, we have 6 kids. Lord saved me when I was in college. So I went to seminary, which in some ways was bad, in some ways was good. And after seminary, I went the route of entrepreneurship. So I've started 4 or 5 different businesses over the past 20 years. Mostly just a lot of what drove my thinking was what God has joined together, let no man break asunder. And even before I really began to study and understand more about the household, in the history of how households functioned as kind of united socio-economic political units, I knew that I really didn't want to spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week sundered from my family, especially when my kids were little. And so that really pushed me early on in marriage into figuring out how I could work for myself, what are things I could build that were good for my greater community, that also had kind of other goals I had in mind, while letting me bring my wife and children along with me as much as possible, instead of my economic provision for my family being at loggerheads with my presence with my family, which is, I know, an issue a lot of guys just struggle with right now. And so part of that eventually became, we wanted to get out of a major city, especially the city of Louisville. I knew back in the late 2000s that the city of Louisville was going to become a much less friendly place to raise a family. And so we bought some land out of the city, and we live a little bit outside of a major city now in a slightly more rural area.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you were saved in college and then you went to seminary. This seems to be a very standard track for a lot of folks, especially in the Baptist world. You get some young man, becomes Christian, saved in college, on fire for God, and it's just like, oh, you're young, you're male, and you're passionate about God and the gospel and the Bible. And so obviously you should be a pastor. And that's not always a good path for a lot of these guys. But tell us, how was that for you? How did you end up going to seminary, and just a few minutes on like what was your seminary experience like?
So what you hit on is exactly what happened to me. The Lord saved me. I wanted to learn more about the Lord, and I wanted to serve the Lord, and especially in the late 90s, you very much had this pietistic view. Well, the way you serve the Lord is ministry. So even though I was, again, gifted in entrepreneurship, very good academically and otherwise, I could have gone into a number of very lucrative fields. The only thing anybody could ever offer me in the church was to say, oh, well, if you love the Lord, of course you're going to go to seminary and be a pastor, because that's what people who really love the Lord do. And so seminary wasn't bad for me. I had a number of tremendously great professors, some of whom I'm good friends with. But it was my first exposure to seeing firsthand how American society at large kind of mimics problems that the church created, and how much the church at large has just bought into wholesale large chunks of, post World War II American society and ethos. And so, there's a lot of good that came out of seminary for me. And in some ways, for some people, seminary is like getting the COVID vaccine. And in some ways, seminary is like realizing you would never take that vaccine, even if somebody held a gun to your head. And I was in the latter camp. Seminary really heavily inoculated me against that kind of mainstream propagandizing that took out, though, a bunch of my other friends who I went to school with.
Yeah, that's such a frustrating it's such a frustrating thing that happens with seminaries, is that the way that they are currently run makes it to where the guys who should be pastors get run off, and the guys who have no business ever being pastors get the paperwork that allows them to walk into a church. And especially, we're talking in Baptist churches, like you basically sit down for an interview to get the pastor job. It's very different from other denominations. And, a lot of these guys, like I didn't go to seminary, but I had my undergrad in theology, and just a lot of those guys, I was like, why do you want this, man? Like literally everything that comes out of your mouth is contra like the church fathers or directly scripture or whatever. Like all you want to do is liberalize the church. Why? Why is that your mission in life? I don't understand that. So I've also kind of seen that struggle with the school system as far as training up pastors, and it tends to just run a lot of them out. There's a huge group of people. And like I said, I didn't go seminary, but I would say if you do your undergrad in theology, that's the only reason for it. There's a lot of guys that are like us that went through that and then didn't end up becoming pastors. And so we have these useless degrees. As far as like getting a job, they're useless. But yeah, it's there's a whole bunch of us now. So now you have all these really well-taught, but you have these learned, well-read guys who did the program, but they're not in the pastorate. And then they go online, and the guy's like, well, I'm a pastor, so I know what I'm talking about. And it's like, well, we did the same school you did, fool. Like you just got, you just got the
the pat on the back, and the handshake. Yeah, you
convinced all the old ladies to let you have a job. Like that's the only difference. Anyways, that's my rant on that. But I did want to ask, when I was muted, I was trying to ask a question. So is Louisville the official pronunciation we're going with?
So I'm originally from Northeast Ohio.
Okay.
I'm just never I'm never going to pronounce that word in a way that makes anyone happy.
Yeah.
Like a lot
nobody can.
I just don't really even care though. People look at me aghast when I say it wrong.
No, but that's the problem is no matter how you say, like I've heard people say Louisville, like that's how they say it, or like Louisville, or just crazy things. I always say Louisville too because I'm a baseball fan, and Louisville Slugger is, everyone knows it. Like no one pronounces that wrong.
And that's probably why I referred to it that way, because I grew up in a bit of a baseball football town.
Yeah.
And all of us kids had Louisville Slugger, baseball bats.
Right.
So
yeah, I had to clear the air on that. I know that it's just anytime somebody talks about that city, I'm like, how do you pronounce it? Like, what team are you on within the inner city rivalry on that?
Maybe I'll just start going highbrow and pronounce in the old French way. Be like Louisville.
Louisville.
Yeah. Just make up your own one so that you see how many people go with it. So you had mentioned in different words, the post-war consensus. Like that's the hot thing right now is poking that eye out, the post-war consensus. And so what would you say is, if you could define that, what is the post-war consensus and why is it bad that it was brought in through the church? And even if you want to address like how you believe the church, because you had said it's been brought in the culture through the church, how would you say that happened?
Oh goodness. So this would be a whole episode.
Yeah.
Obviously, for your listeners, every year I choose books to read. And earlier this year, I chose 3 what I thought were very different books to read. One was Reno's Return of the Strong Gods. One was a book recommended by C.R. Wiley. It's the guy who wrote Soulcraft is Shopcraft. It was his book on attention, the attentional marketplace. And then the third book was The Boys in the Boat. So 3 books as radically different as you could possibly imagine. And I get into all 3 of these books, and I'm amazed to see that all 3 books at their core are haunted by the same fundamental reshaping event for modernity. And they all refer back to it in numerous ways throughout the books. Reno's book is obviously Return of the Strong Gods. His fundamental thesis is the response to World War I and World War II was to break down strong affections and ties at every single level of societal order and culture.
Right.
And so I really like that way of approaching what is the post-war consensus. It's basically an attack on creational affections.
Yeah.
The goal is to break down the historic strong glues that made families, households, communities, et cetera, what they were. Because the view after the wars was these strong affections and attachments are what lead to disaster. Right. So we need to do everything we can to dissolve them.
Yeah, anytime people start talking about big bad man mustache daddy, they start saying, the reason that he was such a bad person is because he loved his country and he was a nationalist. You have the NSDAP, the National Socialist Workers Party, right? And nobody has a problem with the fact that he was a socialist, because if you look at the United States at the time, FDR was far more socialist than Germany, than Hitler. And, as much as England was a bastion of free markets, it was still pretty socialist itself. So it was, everybody was socialist. So that wasn't the problem. And it wasn't that they were the workers' party, because, workers of the world unite. Everybody's trying to pander to the working class because it had a huge explosion in popularity. The part that everybody disliked about Hitler and the reason they hated him was because he was a nationalist, because he loved his people. And that was the big bad boogeyman after the war. It's like, well, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to love your people. You're not allowed to love your place. You can be for socialist programs. You can be an outright communist. You can be a communist and still go and commune in LCMS churches. But if you make yourself out to be a nationalist, you'll be ridden out on a rail.
Yep.
So how would you say it was brought in through the church?
Well, the seminaries were easy pickings for this kind of propagandizing. This is one of the very good benefits of seminary, is doing modern church history. And, you already have kind of progressive liberalizing encroachment over in Europe in the 15, 16, 1700s, the advent of higher criticism and all of these different schools of thought, reader response theory, which all kind of are part of the bedrock of the tools that were used post World War II to attack the undermoorings of how people traditionally had lived and viewed reality. And so the seminaries basically spoon-fed this stuff to all of the men being trained, and then the men going out into the churches just poisoned church after church after church with multiple layers of this kind of nonsense. And that's I really like this. There's a book I read years ago on intermediary institutions. I'm a big fan of Cooper and his view of, there's church, there's state, there's household as these institutions that are kind of, just like we have three branches of government that theoretically help keep each other in check. So, in reality, we have family, state, and church, each with different spheres and duties. But there's supposed to be a check and balance against each other when functioning. And then you also have intermediary institutions that flow out of these other ones that further dilute power and whatnot. And so when the churches began to poison their people, they basically poisoned all of these intermediary institutions as well. And it just ran roughshod so quickly through the culture after that.
Right. And it left the family, because the family takes a lot of its direction from, especially in these days, the state and the church. You send your children to school all day and they get propagandized into, for good or ill, propagandized into the ideals of the state. And then on Sunday, you go to church and you sit down under the leadership of a pastor. And for many families, and it shouldn't be this way, but it is the reality of things, for many families, that is the only Bible you're going to hear all week long, is from the pastor. And if the pastor gets up in the pulpit on Sunday morning and he says, the whole world is your family, and, we should be prioritizing foreign missions and we should be sacrificing ourselves for the good of the world. And then you go to school during the week and your teacher tells you about how actually your history is bad and the founding fathers of America were all racist, bad people. And the Civil War was all about, the South trying to continue the world's worst institution, slavery. And you get this propaganda that on one hand is saying, love people who are unlike you. And on the other hand is saying, hate people who are like you. And it's essentially the suicide of a society.
So, John, for the record, for those watching, are you drinking some Kentucky Clear, or is that just water in a mason jar? Like what?
It's just water in a mason.
Oh, okay. We're not drinking no White Lightning or nothing like that.
No, not tonight.
No? Okay. So the big thing that when I talked with Jeff, I was like, I really want to have John Moody on because I want to talk about chickens. Like I know we started by talking about the post-war consensus, but chickens was like, just a couple of years ago when we first started getting them, it took over like it became our identity very quick within the neighborhood because we're the chicken people. And, we have the rooster that wakes people up at whatever hour. Ours aren't too bad. We have them locked up in like a timer. We have like a timer door. And so that kind of keeps them from getting crazy before the sun goes up. But with chickens, I had said before the show when we were talking that chickens is almost like table stakes when we talk about like homesteading or like any kind of I don't want to say this, like a productive household in that you're doing something for yourself. Like, so like the eggs that I get from the chickens, like I'm not reliant on someone else to get eggs. Like I go down to the store and get feed, but I mean, I also have, like, we throw table scraps out to the chickens. We're not like super crunchy about it. Like we'll throw the mac and cheese to the chickens, let them eat it. But
he'll feed his chickens scrambled eggs.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll even, like, if we have you buy like a rotisserie chicken at the store, and like when we're done with it, we'll just put the carcass out there and they'll just pick it clean. Like we're not very we're not super environmentally serious about what we feed our chickens, but
well, I mean, I'd say that's what chickens are truly made to eat, though.
Each
chickens,
other.
Well, I mean, oh yeah. Well, if you have enough chickens, if you notice a chicken that gets hurt,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
the other chicken's goal is to kill and eat that chicken as quickly as possible.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's pretty barbaric. Like it.
Yeah.
It gets pretty wild.
Yeah, and if you think the eggs coming from the store are not coming from chickens who have eaten each other, I've got another thing coming for you, because those factory farms, it's dog eat dog, or in this case, chicken eat chicken. It is survival of the fittest, and they do eat each other a lot, to the extent where they literally invent ways to prevent them from trying to eat each other.
Well, that's why they debeak them. It's one of the main reasons modern chickens are debeaked.
They tend to put red light in there, because then any blood that's on a chicken, instead of looking like blood, it looks black, and so they're less likely to get torn apart by the other chickens. So it's like, in a natural world, chickens are omnivorous, carnivorous. They'll eat anything.
We put this weird purple stuff on the chickens when they're hurt, and apparently it like makes it taste bad or something. Like I don't know what all's going on with that, but
it also helps heal things.
Yeah,
it's also got a numbing agent in there.
Yeah, I'm sure
we used to spray that on ourselves anytime we tore each other up. When we worked with horses, you get a scrape on you, take some of that, cattle spray and just spray it on your leg, and it feels a little funky, but it does the job.
John, you had said something on one of the platforms where you were talking about, because your posts are sometimes very long, like you'll have like whole essays on the timeline, and every once in a while I'll read the entire thing instead of just, well, he's a cool guy, I'll just give him a like. But I was reading one of them. It really struck me personally, because you were talking about people who will have chickens and then they'll sell those eggs and then take that money to the grocery store and buy store-bought eggs for their family. And you were saying, like, why would you do that? Like, why would you give the better, healthier thing to some other guy and then feed your kids the scraps of that? So could you speak to that? I mean, not just with eggs, but like with anything that you grow or...
Yeah, the first time
as another example, right before you say this, I mean, I have friends who are cattle ranchers, and they eat mostly chicken, right? So they sell beef at exorbitant prices, like grass-fed beef, and they do eat their own beef sometimes, but most of the time they're eating grocery store chicken, and for them it's just a money thing, And I can see the argument for people being like, yeah, but I sell my eggs for $8 a dozen. I go to the store and $1.99, I get another dozen, But as you're saying, John,
stuff like that's just, it's hard for me to wrap my head around it. Some people do it out of, some people do it out of ignorance, And some people do it because, one thing that's rampant in our culture is subsidizing other people's lifestyles and bad choices. And I always hate when I see farmers and homesteaders doing this. And so a lot of times what's going on is people are they're subsidizing other people's lifestyles, and then they can't afford to give their family good things. And I'm just like, have you not heard Jesus's words? What father, if his son asks for bread, gives him a stone, and if his son asks for fish, gives him a serpent? Your goal as a father is to give good things to your household. Your children and wife are expecting good things from you. So why would you give the good things to other people and give the lower quality or bad things to your own family? Just like, how do you operate this way? What's your malfunction that gets you to this place?
Yeah. There's a lot of people who will kind of not counter signal, but that's the best word I have for it at the moment, is they'll kind of counter signal the idea of having your own chickens or any other kind of food producing thing, like having goats just for the milk or something like that. Like we have not a neighbor, but someone in our town does goats for milk. And so we go buy goat milk in like a pretty large mason jar. I don't know what the size of it is, maybe less than a gallon. I don't know, but it's really good. Goat milk is like the best. It's delicious. I thought for sure it would be kind of soury, but it's sweet. It tastes like somebody dumped a bunch of sugar inside of milk or something. Like that's what it tastes like to me. Jeff is obviously not a fan of the goat milk.
Well, most people who dislike goat milk have had goat milk that's been handled poorly.
Really?
The big differences between goat milk and cow milk is cow milk is more resilient under handling. And
especially Jersey milk. Jersey milk is the king of milk.
I won't disagree with you there. But if you have really well handled goat milk, you don't have a lot of the complaints of taste issues that are so common with goat milk.
So there were some friends of ours who are goat farmers, and they harvest the milk. And one thing that they do is, first off, everything is immaculately clean, which if it's not just that it's going to taste different, but it's also going to make you sick. So milk that tastes good is a good sign because it generally means it's clean. But one thing that they would do is they would, when they were milking the goats, it would immediately go through a screen into a bucket that was ice packed. So it was like an insulated bowl with ice inside it and a bowl on top of that. So this milk was going from, goat body temperature to freezing cold just immediately. And that's about the only goat milk that I can stand. And it is good, but it's not better than cow milk. I mean, I've had cow milk straight out of the cow, still warm, and it's like drinking ice cream. It is unbeatable.
That's funny. You said straight out of the cow. Do you mean like lips on the nips, or what are we talking here?
I'm not sucking on a teat out there.
Oh, okay.
Going straight into a glass or a bucket.
Yeah.
And it's good stuff.
Sure, Jeff. But where I was going with making money with the
story, compelling and rich.
Yeah. There's people who will kind of push back on, don't get your own chickens. It's not cost effective. You're going to be, working all these hours to save $5 and blah, 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 which isn't, first of all, that's not true. Chickens are fairly low maintenance in my experience. And second, like, making money isn't the reason to have the chickens. Like, I mean, you can. I mean, there's other people who say, like, no, you will never make money. Well, that's not true either. But you have the chickens because you now get better eggs. You know where the eggs came from. You know what the chickens ate before they laid the egg. You know that it's not like dyed white like the ones you get. like that now like creeps me out. Now when I see a white egg like that, like it creeps me out. Like the duck egg, we have these 2 ducks. I don't even know why, but we got ducks now. And
Because you're married to a woman.
yeah, like I want these ducks. Duck eggs are gross, dude. Duck eggs taste like farts. I am not a duck. I'm not a duck egg guy.
But they make great pastries. That's what my wife sold me on when we got ducks. It's like, yeah, they're not great for eating, but they're great for baking. It's like, okay, well, you better be making me some really nice stuff all the time.
Yeah,
which she does. So,
but anyways, yeah, the advantage of having the chickens is that you're getting the best eggs you can possibly get. Like that's what the advantage is. We honestly we give away a lot of eggs as like favors or you know, just when we meet people and we want to make a good impression. Hey, here's some eggs from our backyard, and they're like, "What? This is crazy!" And people think like you're super country because you have chickens, which is like it's table stakes. It's not even above and beyond to just have chickens. And we both love animals, so it's just cool to have those animals. I like just admiring the chickens in the backyard. We have them gated off into half of the backyard, just so that we have some grass in the backyard. And I just like looking at them sometimes. So that's kind of my thing. Is that's my like soapbox on chickens. Is people will try to put that down like it's not worth having the best eggs you can possibly have. And so I don't know how you feel about that, but because we were talking about. No, go on.
You know, so the first thing is there are a lot of people who have chickens and they do it really dumb.
Yeah.
Years ago, we had friends and they were like, we're going to get chickens and we're going to save money over buying egg from the farm. And about 6 months into them having chickens, he came to me one day and he's just like, these things eat so much and they're flying over the fence into my neighbor's yard.
Oh, no.
And he had finally ran the numbers. And this was back in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And he was paying $11 a dozen for his eggs in 2012.
yeah.
And so one thing I always talk about when it comes to building a productive home is not everything needs to make money, but things need to make economic and labor sense for your family.
Yeah. They need to not be a sinkhole.
So, and the other thing I always emphasize to people is you need to have a couple things that really produce true economic excess if you want to float other things that are neutral, if you actually want to move your family forward over time. So a great, very old book on this is Xenophon's Oikonomos, which you can read in Greek if you know Greek, or you can get an English translation. Wiley recommended I read years ago a bunch of the Greco-Roman literature that shaped what Paul writes about in his epistles. And Xenophon's book, Oikonomos, Law of the Household, or household management, depending on kind of how you wanted to, nomos, law, oikos, household. His book on household is very economically focused in the modern sense. There's a lot of practical household management stuff in the book, but especially the male, the good household manager male, the hero of the story. He is known for his financial acumen. He is a sharp businessman in every sense of the word with his decision making over his household, because he's trying to move his household forward. He's trying to be the man that can leave an inheritance to his children's children. And so the only thing that gets me nervous with some homesteady people is I constantly see them adding more and more things to their family that are actually moving them economically in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And it's also degrading the quality of their family's life to the point where their children want to have nothing to do with what the parents had done, because the children never got to have any sort of quality of life because, well, we have a milk cow now. You can't play baseball.
Yeah.
Oh, we have this animal now. We can't go see friends for a week down hither or thither. And, I often say a lot of people claim to have achieved freedom when they've actually just built themselves a different type of prison.
Yeah. So what would be some ideas that you have for productive households that would be positive?
Oh, goodness. Well, again, anything can be positive.
Yeah.
It's finding and focusing on things that are good matches for your family, that you enjoy, and that move your family forward. So my wife makes our own soap, and she started making soap, and she just really enjoyed making soap. She thought it was a fun process. And so when she started doing that, I as again, trying to be a good leader of my home, I sat down with her and I said, how much is it costing you to make soap? Not just in terms of the ingredients and whatnot, but in terms of time. And what can we do to make you 3, 4, 5, 6 times more efficient and profitable doing soap? Well, it was simple things like, hey, instead of doing one batch at a time, do a double or triple batch. Well, that means we need a few more pieces of equipment.
Yeah.
But that means you have so much less cleanup, and you're batching the labor. And that lets you buy ingredients in a larger size, which can bring down the price 30, 40, 50%. And now something that was not a negative for our household, her making soap, is now always a positive for our household. And that's what you need to do. You just want to find things that you enjoy and that make sense. It's like I see people with gardens, and they will grow green beans and then snap green beans and clean green beans and can green beans. And the amount, they will spend 40 hours of labor and time and space to grow what's the equivalent of like $80 of canned green beans. And again, if you want to do that, I'm not against it. But when you begin to rack up lots and lots of things in your household that are net economic negatives and that take up a lot of your time and bandwidth, we lose the opportunities to do things that are more valuable, and especially things that culturally and church-wise are going to let us get back to some sort of parity of influence and power.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just like I always tell people, you don't need to grow 40 different vegetables in your garden.
Yeah.
Grow the things that are valuable to your family and that make sense.
And that you enjoy growing.
And that you enjoy, so, think about how much it costs to buy flowers. A lot of people who are growing green beans would actually make more money growing flowers. And then their wife has instead of buying these ridiculous oversprayed flowers that they're flying in from Venezuela. I grow my wife flowers, and then she dries flowers. So the house has flowers all winter, all of these different dried flowers all over the house that are just incredibly beautiful. Dried flowers and it's just finding things that are truly valuable. And since value is somewhat subjective, what one family is going to settle on is going to be different than others. But for some families, it might not even be homesteady stuff at all. It might be building products, or it might be doing car repairs, or it might be doing appliance repair.
Yeah, that reminds me of the story of me with potatoes. We had I think like most people, like I have in my backyard, I have a mow strip. That's what we always call it, but it's basically like a very thin concrete line that goes through it, so it divides it from the other part of the line. We always called that a mow strip. I don't know if that's the best word for it, but it divides it into like a very small like planter box type thing. And I said we had potatoes that had come alive because we forgot they were there. And so you know how potatoes get, where they're like, show me the soil, and they're like growing all over the place. And so I said, I'm just going to bury this potato. We'll see what happens, right? And that was really cool. Like I think we did it around, I think it was like in the springtime before it got too hot or something like that. Like it was either spring or fall where like Texas doesn't kill everything. And it was a cool experience. It was like, I got to see a potato flower. Like I didn't know that they did that until I saw it grow. I was like, what am I growing here? But it's just potato. But it was funny when I went to harvest them, and I got because I had buried a bunch of potatoes. I buried like red potatoes, russet potatoes, just all the ones we had forgotten about in the pantry that had grown eyes and started going. And I didn't really give them any care or nothing like that. I just kind of water them maybe every once in a while, but they grew very well. And then I went to go dig them up, and there was enough for like one night's worth of dinner potatoes, right? So it wasn't like a time investment, but it was one of those things where I was like, why did I even do this? Like just for the experience. That was it. That was all I got out of it, was like, I can put a potato in the ground and leave it, and it'll make more potatoes, but it's not gonna be a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and that's why I don't grow potatoes currently. I grow fabulous potatoes. I'm actually teaching potato growing at Homesteaders of America this fall. But I quit growing potatoes a few years ago, and all I grow is sweet potatoes.
Oh, okay.
Because in roughly 10 hours of labor, I can grow 400 pounds of sweet potatoes.
Really?
Which are worth at $2 to $3 a pound for organic sweet potatoes, $800 to $1,200 of sweet potatoes.
How much land does that take to grow that many sweet potatoes?
Oh, almost none. We're talking. Yeah. I get about. I yield about a pound per square foot, or a little more. So you're talking,
really?
400 square feet or less.
Especially if you use bins.
Wow.
So. And I get about 20 pounds per plant of sweet potatoes.
Man, if only sweet potatoes were any good.
Oh, no.
Come on.
Dude. Man, Jeff is very opinionated about his food. Have you had white sweet potatoes?
No, I've not. I've had the purple ones because my wife was like, look, purple sweet potatoes, they're totally different. But I have a very mild sweet potato allergy. And it's very mild. It's like I'll get an itchy tummy, right? And I'll just be scrubbing my stomach. And then it goes away after a couple hours. But I think it has a secondary effect where it's just I don't like the taste of them. And I think it's because my body just is like, this is not for you. So that's just a unique to me thing. But I've heard, if you look at potatoes in Peru, it's like
very different.
Potatoes that we have in the United States, first off, every potato in the United States, practically every potato, comes from Ireland. It's either Ireland or Europe proper. And then all of the potatoes in Europe came from South America, specifically Peru. So our potatoes are derivative of derivative. And, when you go down to Peru, they've got like potatoes that have flavors that are completely foreign to us, different textures, different flowers and leaves. And it's a whole thing. So, it's a very diverse crop. But you're talking about that you teach a class right now on how to plant potatoes. I had a question for you. Do you do phase of the moon when you're planting potatoes specifically?
Well, because my life is busy, if situations are ideal, the following the moon has some benefits to how crops grow.
Mm-hmm.
But
could you explain that? Like, because this is the first I'm ever hearing about following the moon like this. I'm taking notes, so.
Well, because it's the light that the sun reflects off the moon affects crops when you plant them.
Okay.
And it impacts germination and growth rates and stuff. So in an ideal world, when I'm not having spring flooding or late frosts and freezes, I'll do what I can. But I have not seen that big a difference in final yields to where I will, totally upend my life to make sure that my planting matches, what's going on with the lunar month.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, my younger sister, which I say younger sister, my only sister, who is the youngest of our cadre, is one of the best gardeners that I know. My mother-in-law, my deceased grandfather, and my sister, some of the best gardeners. And my sister absolutely swears by the phase of the moon thing. And, back when we were teenagers, because I'm contrary and confrontational, she was big into this phase of the moon thing. And I was just like, this is astrology for gardeners. So I decided I was going to, because I was a potato king, I decided I was going to grow some potatoes, some by the phase of the moon on one side of the property. And then on the other side of the property, I was going to do them, according to, plant them on Valentine's Day, which is what all the old potato gardeners say, do it on Valentine's Day. And so one was Valentine's Day. The other one was the closest moon phase to the Valentine's Day. And it was night and day difference. I mean, one of them just buckets and buckets of potatoes, and one of them was still a good yield. It's not like it didn't do well, but it was not what the other one was. And I've used phase of the moon, especially for any of my root vegetables. I think it really makes a bigger difference. If you're growing jalapenos, it's not a big deal. But I think for root vegetables, turnips, all of that stuff, it makes a big difference, phase of the moon. So I've heard some people, and this is, quasi-science, pseudoscience, what do you say? But it's like, how the moon affects the tide, right? Well, what are plants full of? Water. Well, there you go. There's your moon phase effect right there. So maybe that's a little too pedestrian, but maybe there's something to that.
So, John, you'd said that you started 4 or 5 businesses. Do you care to kind of give an overview of what all?
Yeah. So when I was in seminary, my first business outside. So I've tutored. Even when I was in high school, I had started tutoring people for money. So I had a tutoring business that was very small through high school, even in college some. Then when I got into seminary, I scaled that business up a fair bit to where I was basically tutoring, 20, 25 hours a week, some weeks, mathematics, science, ACT, SAT prep, bunch of those, interrelated subjects. I also, during seminary, my undergraduate degree is business finance, and I interned at my college's foundation. And so I went to a state college, and even though we were a state college, Youngstown State University, Northeast Ohio, this was 1996 through 2000. And I believe our endowment was $400 million back then.
Whoa.
And the reason it was is I got to work under this guy, because I was a finance major, so I had to do a finance internship. And I chose for one of my internships to work at the foundation under this guy by the name of Reed Schmutz. And
early life check on that guy.
And man, like that man could have gotten Ebenezer Scrooge to part with his life fortune and smiled about it. And so I worked under this guy, and the foundation basically had only a couple parts. There's managing the endowment and growing the endowment, and then giving out money, for to according to the various scholarship programs. And that was just like that job was a total, I learned so much in that 6-month period working under him in terms of people and other stuff. But I also learned a lot about how scholarships actually work and how to look for them. And so I noticed that Southern Seminary, where I went, it had a scholarship office, and it was completely worthless. So I went into the scholarship office, and me being very young and very naive, I offered to help for free. I'm just like, you all could do so much better for students. I will just come in and help you with the scholarship office. And nobody had, I went to one of my professors, and I'm like, I went to the scholarship office, and they had no interest in actually helping the students, And he's like, well, why don't you just do it and charge a finder's fee if a student actually gets scholarships because of your help? And so I did that for a couple years.
Nice.
And I really liked that business, but it became a little difficult because some students got mad that I would help them. And now they'd get a $3,000 scholarship, but they would have to pay me $900 just the first year. So, I found them $9,000. They have to pay me $900. And they're like, this is so unfair.
Yeah, especially since it's an unrealized savings, right? It's like you're not being handed $3,000. You're just being charged $3,000 less for 3 years. And now here's this guy saying, hey, $900 cash now, hand it over. It's like, if I'm a cash poor student, I know that I could use a discount. But then somebody says, okay, you have to pay me. It's like, well, where am I going to get the money from, right? Can be a bit tricky.
Well, they never had to pay me until they received the first year's scholarship. So they had the first $3,000. I just realized I had way less trouble, and I probably should have diversified this direction. But when I worked with secular people or people who are sending their kids to public college and help them get scholarships, never once had pushback a single time. Not a single person ever complained about the structure. It was only Christians at the seminary. So that also introduced me real quick into like how a lot of Christians, rightly or wrongly, understand finance and economics and labor and work. So then I started a local food buying club in 2006. And that business is still going on today, Louisville Whole Life.
But then, it got shut down for a while, didn't it?
No, we just got raided. We never closed. We were the first group in the nation to be raided, most likely at the behest of the FDA by a state level health department, and to win. So we never shut down. They tried to shut us down, served us with cease and desist and quarantine orders, and we just never stopped. We actually won in about a 6 or 7 day period.
Wow, that was a quick turnaround then.
Yeah, that's a story for a different day. And that taught me just a great deal about how to effectively deal with run-amok government agencies. And then we had an elderberry syrup business that we started in 2017. And this is where, it was really in the late 2010s that a lot of things I wish would have clicked for me in my 20s. I finally was like, man, why am I doing things that make $10 an hour when I can be doing things that make $150 an hour? Right. And partly that was because of, as we added more kids, I just realized how much more resources you actually need. But then especially having a disabled daughter, in realizing the long-term needs having a disabled child were going to create, that I didn't want to pawn off onto her siblings. I was just like, I need to make real money. I need to be doing things that are generating, and this is what you really see, because again, Xenophon's oikonomos, Abraham in the Bible, the kind of men who should be elders are men who have really good business acumen. You know, a man who does not provide for his household is worse than an unbeliever.
Right.
If a man wants to be an elder, he must pro istemi, he must stand before or represent. I really hate translations that translate it manage his household well, because it's just it's a terrible translation of that word, and it makes men and women look the same, because there's two words Paul uses for a woman's relationship to her home in the New Testament. And then there's words Paul uses to describe a man's relationship to the house in the New Testament. And the word Paul uses for men is the word used of like a general standing before his army, or a priest representing people, or the heads of the Levitical orders and stuff. It's the man has this leadership representative role, not that the man is necessarily bogged down in the nitty gritty stuff. So started this elderberry syrup business. We grew that over the course of a few years to a, like $150,000, $200,000 a year in sales business that was completely wiped out in 12 months of Rona.
Mm-hmm.
Because I built the business around things I value, and I value small independent businesses, which were the businesses that my governor and other governors decided were not allowed to be open during Rona.
Right.
Well, you should have grew weed.
Seriously.
Yeah. You never would have been shut down. You would have been doing just fine. Be a millionaire today.
Yeah.
So we had the elderberry syrup business, but we sold that, I believe it was 2022. Because between Rona and then also my state's regulatory environment, I had a local inspector come by, and we were talking about, us building a certified kitchen to actually be able to keep up with production. And he basically said, he's like, your kids will be graduated from college before you'll pay off building a certified kitchen in Kentucky. I sold the business to some friends who are just in Indiana. So like, a bit over
Right
a stone's throw away from us. And he was able to build a certified kitchen in the state of Indiana for like $1,800. just night and day. And that really quickly, it's always been another theme of my life, realizing that a lot of our problems with family economy are rooted in the insane regulatory and licensing and other systems that now dominate almost every part of the American economy.
100%. Yeah.
Almost anything I want to do to make money that actually can make good money, I'm running into ridiculous standards and roadblocks. My daughter Abby's in here eavesdropping. She might remember though, for the elderberry business, you have to put labels on your product.
Right.
So I made labels for the product. I didn't realize that Kentucky has a label czar. A lady.
Be the right font and the right size. And
oh my word.
That was one of the maddest I've ever seen my mom.
Yeah, my wife actually during a phone call with this label lady almost went. My wife is one of the least feisty people when it, she's just like very quiet, very meek, doesn't cause conflict. And she's listening to me on the phone with this label lady. And like, I'm seeing veins popping out on my wife. Like she's about to turn into the Incredible Hulk that I did not even know she had. She was so angry with how this lady was interacting with me. Because the lady was just a total demon, where Yeah, it was just, because so we would sometimes use, I'm trying to remember what it was exactly.
Glycerin, I think.
Well, yeah, it's like we were using glycerin in one of our formulas. And so on the label, I put glycerin and I put coconut or one other type of glycerin, because I wanted people to know it was a food-based glycerin, not an industrial produced one. And the lady's like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, I'm holding a bag of potato chips here that say vegetable oil, parenthesis, canola or peanut or sunflower. So why can this chip maker do this and I can't? And the lady just like lost her mind. She's like, we're not going to approve you. We're going, and my wife's just there like ready to go through the phone and strangle this lady. So we had the elderberry business, and the state of Kentucky is a terrible place for small businesses. Mm-hmm. So we sold that to friends. Joel Salatin and I started a conference together called Rogue Food. We have an event coming up in September in Ohio. And then we're actually going to be doing, since you all are good Texans, it looks like we're going to be doing another one the week of the South Dakota Rapid City Rodeo, which I guess is like one of the biggest rodeos in the world and the highest rated rodeo in America. And so Joel and I have been doing that conference together for a few years. And then I speak at a bunch of conferences, and I've written a number of books. And then and then the other part of my work at this point, though, over the past 4 or 5 years, is I've started doing more and more consulting for mid-sized companies in the food farming and homesteading space, where companies will hire me to help them with product development, to help them with marketing, to do a wide range of tasks, to kind of move their company through pain points, or keep me on retainer to do particular types of work for the company in an ongoing fashion.
Right. There's another thing about family economy that just sort of occurred to me organically. And this, I've applied it to my family economy, but I began by applying it to myself in my day job, while I'm at work. This very simple principle of be doing more than one thing at a time. But what I mean by that is not multitasking. Like, I'm not talking about texting while driving, right? It's like, man, driving is real bad. You got to make sure you're texting while you're doing it. Be talking to somebody while you're doing this. But be sure that what you're doing, if you're doing more than one thing at a time, that's good. Like, I can be on the phone with my dad while I'm working on my motorcycle, right? And I can be, saying happy birthday. I can be talking to my nephews and nieces and things like that. But even beside that, if you have something that you're doing, have it be fulfilling more than one goal, right? So having chickens produces eggs, right? That's good. But also have your children involved, give them responsibilities so that they're learning, a skill, so that they're learning responsibilities, so that they're having chores. And then also at the same time, give those eggs to your neighbors. You're improving the relationship with them. Each of these things having multiple effects, make sure that those knock-on effects are desirable and that you're utilizing them in the most advantageous way, right? So while I'm at work, I'm going to also be, sending out emails or phone calls, take a lunch break, send something off to somebody. Or while I'm raising chickens, I'm going to, be collecting eggs and maybe doing meat birds as well. But I'm using the same coop and I'm using the same facilities, as it were, but I'm using it for more than one purpose. And things along those lines where if you can be producing something while also getting a secondary effect that isn't necessarily productive, right? You don't have to be making money or even a product to be investing good time with your children. I can be out in the backyard cutting firewood for my winter heating, and at the same time teaching my son how to run a chainsaw. Two things that I'm doing at the same time. So that is another thing for people to keep in mind is each of these things that you want to pursue, look at the secondary effects, look at the other things that you can do with your time, and try to be investing it as broadly and as fully as you possibly can.
Yeah, I have a bunch of posts, the essays Sean was referring to. We tend to, in my circles, refer to it as function stacking.
Right.
It's, if I have chickens, I want to make sure I deeply bed them so I capture all of the manure they produce.
Mm-hmm.
Because roughly 70% of the nutritional value of feed that a chicken eats goes right out the back end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's actually less work to do deep bedding because cleanup is easier. So you've got a secondary effect. You said it's called what stacking?
Function stacking.
Function stacking. Right.
I rarely do a phone call if I'm not outside weeding or doing some other task. And then, so I'm on the phone. So now I'm physically moving around, getting my steps in. I'm weeding, getting a job done that would otherwise eat up time that I could use for a higher end task. And I'm knocking out these various phone calls usually. When I used to drive to Louisville more regularly, and when our soil was really bad when we first moved here, whenever I would drive to town, I would drive by a couple coffee shops and a few other places. And because I already have the drive to town, I'm just adding another 15, 20, 30 minutes. I'd pick up 1,000 pounds of compost because this let me rebuild the soil on my farm, but it also let me create free food for my chickens.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it also built relationships for places. Then we were able to sell stuff once we had stuff to sell. So there's so many things in life should be what originally got me onto this idea is somebody once asked Francis Schaeffer, what is the biggest problem with Western people? And so, this is Schaeffer, pretty well-respected, nationally respected guy. What is he going to say? What is the biggest problem with modern people in the West? And he said they see all of life in bits and pieces. They see everything truncated and broken apart from everything else. So like everything is isolated and individualized, as opposed to the more historic way of seeing everything tied together and holistically. And then years after that, I read a Wendell Berry essay where in a different way, he was talking about this same subject, how, it used to be you walked to work or your work was physically demanding, so you didn't need a gym membership. And when you walked to work, you were usually walking with other people who were traveling this way. So you're spending time with neighbors or family members, or you and your family were walking to work together. So you're all getting exercise. Life was naturally function stacked in the past. Wendell's point was a whole bunch of things we now pay for, even down to people paying for friendship, I think is where he went in the essay, were things that historically you just got part of living a normal life.
Right.
And so a big view of my household, as we talked about earlier, was trying to, as much as possible, bring pieces back together so that when I work, I'm spending time with my children. So it's conference, when we had the elderberry business, to run a production run of elderberry, a bunch of these elderberry makers are hiring 3, 4, 5 people. Well, I have 3, 4, 5, 6 children. And it's just like, hey, we're going to the elderberry kitchen tonight, kids. And we would throw on books to listen to while making elderberry. So now I'm doing homeschooling as a dad. We are making money as a family. I'm teaching my kids how to work. They are earning money that they're setting aside, that they're learning to manage. They're learning the relationship between their labor and work. And then we're talking about great books while we're making, so I'm doing homeschool, moving my family forward economically, spending time with my children, and it's all function stacked together, moving a whole bunch of balls forward at once instead of homeschooling being in one bucket and making money being in another bucket and spending quality time with my kids being in a bucket and having these important discussions being in. And this is why a lot of guys feel so overwhelmed, because if everything's cut apart, there is no way to fit it all back in your schedule. You're just going to absolutely wear yourself out.
The extreme bifurcation of the American life leads to hard shifting and hard gear changing, going one direction, then turning around hard and dashing the other. Even for people who are not in our sphere, as it were. If you just think of a normal middle class family, you've got mom rushing to get the kids off at soccer practice, dad working late, and then dad's got to go run and pick up a pizza for dinner because mom doesn't have time to make one. And then, so-and-so, let's say little Billy's forgot his trumpet at school. So you got to rush back and grab that because he's going to need that first thing for morning music class, right? All of these things where you're being dragged a million different directions. And it's just a much healthier situation if you can function stack it all into one thing. One thing that I think a lot of people miss about homeschooling, I'm not quite in the unschooling camp, but I'm danger close, man. I'm real near it. But for me, homeschooling is more about teaching my children the skills that I wish I had as an adult, right? I don't have to emphasize reading to my children. I can teach them the basics. And then the fact that they're hungry for reading and don't have television and phones in their pockets all the time, they'll get good at reading on their own. But in the meantime, I'm teaching them not just how to read, dramas, but how to read world history, how to read philosophy, things along those lines that are going to help them in the long run. And then at the same time, if I have them helping me run a small side business, do a little bookkeeping on, we're crunching some numbers on this house addition that we're putting in. What, how big is this thing going to be? How tall do these studs need to be? How much do 10 of these studs cost? Because we're going to need those for a frame. And this is all arithmetic. It's all functional arithmetic, but instead of coming out of a book, they're able to lay eyes on it. They're able to put hands on it and apply it directly in their life and see how useful real world knowledge is. And I think that's greatly missed by our modern school system, right? I graduated from high school, did a little bit of college, and then it was years and years before I ever used the math that I learned in college or in high school, because I was working propane, and I decided just on a whim to calculate the volume of the vessels that we were pumping propane in and out of. And I had to look it up because I had forgotten it, how to do that. And so I looked it up, I did this math, and it was fun, but there wasn't much of a practical use for that. But several other things that my kids already learned that I've learned only recently about bookkeeping, especially, very helpful, going to use it their entire lives, knowing how to balance a checkbook, to predict income and outflow. Those things are life skills, and our school system doesn't do a good job of teaching it anyway.
So, John, I want to bounce my business idea off of you. If you don't like it, just throw it right back. All right.
If you like it a lot, steal it.
Yeah, steal it. There you go. No, I want our family's next animal to be goats. I've got a thing about goats right now, and my way of at least in my mind or on paper, my way of making them profitable would be to rent them out to eat people's grass, which is a thing that people do. How, I guess, like, how would you give advice on something like that? I don't know how experienced you are with goats in particular. Because I'm the kind of guy that would be like, oh, let's just jump right in and get goats. You know, damn the torpedoes. Like, let's get the goats. So.
Yeah. So, well, goats aren't as bad as let's jump right in and get cows. I have a hilarious story about that. That did not work out well for a family who then made an emergency cow call to me at like 11 o'clock on a Friday night. So yes, right now, people using goats rather than herbicides. Goats don't primarily eat grass. What's super cool about animals is we have all of these different ruminant animals, but they're niched what they prefer to eat best. And what makes goats amazing is goats are this intermediary animal that basically eats a lot of scrub and small brush and other problematic stuff that grows up on fences and other things that cows don't really eat. So goats eat small trees, they eat shrubs, they eat bushes. That's what goats primarily gnaw down on, not your typical pasture grasses. They'll browse on that a little bit. And that's what makes goats, again, highly valuable, because there's some airports now that use goats to manage the fences and other areas to keep them clear of trees coming up and of things that impact this valuable infrastructure.
Well, Eastern European airports have been doing that since the start.
Yeah. And
they had goats before they had airplanes.
I'll sometimes teach at conferences. I use 3 circles to help people vet business ideas. And one circle is, what is a good fit for your family and for your land and for your skill set and for your resources? One circle is, what is a good fit with anything else you already have going on? One reason we got into elderberry, Jeff, is because I already had the buying club, and the buying club already gave me the ability to scale up sourcing of ingredients at wholesale prices and other things. I already knew how to do these things. So it was an easy crossover business that utilized existing infrastructure and skills.
Right.
And then the third most important one is, though, do you actually have a profitable market for what you want to sell? And can you get to that market in a cost-effective fashion for the value of the product? So a good brother, I'm speaking at his church, actually in just a couple weeks. I need to remember because I need to write my talk. He called me a week or so ago wanting to talk about family economy. Great guy. He works a full-time job, has a wife. They already have a bunch of young kids. They want to have more kids. So he is feeling this tension between presence and provision. So they've been trying to find, as a family, good small business ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Where instead of him having to work overtime, they can work together 1-2 nights a week as a family. And he goes, hey, man, we were thinking about doing a kombucha business. And so this is how I talked him through this thinking. I go, okay, you want to do kombucha? It's a shelf-stable product. Sorry, it's not a shelf-stable product. So you need refrigeration and infrastructure. It's theoretically an inspected, licensed product in Kentucky. So you're going to run into all this regulatory stuff. And I go, how much do you think you can sell a bottle for? He's like, well, $3 or $4. I go, how much will your profit margin be on a bottle? He goes, well, $1, $1.50. I go, how much do you make working one shift of overtime? He goes, well, working an 8-hour overtime shift, I make $500. I go, so how many bottles of kombucha are you going to need to sell? Because I just want him to realize. And then I said, you all live close to this town in Kentucky where there are offices going up out the wazoo. A lot of growth going on. I go, how much do you think those companies pay a cleaning service per hour to come in once or twice a week and clean the offices? Look it up on Google real quick. Companies paying $250, $300 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I go, you have labor.
Yep.
Why would you do this low margin, high volume business with all of these other complications and regulations when you could do this high profit, high labor business because you all produce labor?
Right.
And so for you, Sean, with this idea of goats, the question is, how much are people actually paying? Like how much margin do you have on this business?
Yeah.
And this is stuff since I was a business finance major. I started college as a chem major. I was a mathematics major for a year, wrote a couple math books with one of my professors, decided I didn't want to become the Unabomber, and was a business finance major before I went to seminary.
You haven't really done a great job of not becoming Ted Kaczynski, by the way.
Thanks.
You give that vibe.
You're half a step away.
And so these are the types of tools we need to give men again so that they can make good economic decisions, especially entrepreneurial. But I always tell people that the sweet spot, you either want, the sweet spot in our economy is a lot of these mid-tier products and businesses. $3, $4, $5 products. The volume you need on those products
is
to actually generate money is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one reason I loved elderberry, because I realized, because I used to teach making kombucha and stuff at conferences, but the reason I never started a kombucha business, even though people loved our kombucha, is I'm just like, the volume I would need here is overwhelming to deal with.
Right.
But I could make on one bottle of elderberry syrup what I make on 17 bottles of kombucha.
Wow.
I'm just like, why on earth wouldn't I do elderberry?
What are you selling the elderberry syrup at? Because my wife was doing elderberry syrup pretty regularly for a while, and I never got into the the economics of it with her, but I'm just curious, if she were to get back into that, what would be?
Well, we were selling ours, this was 2020.
Yeah.
We were at $25 for a 16-ounce bottle.
Okay.
But our elderberry had more actual real honey and more elderberry than so many other people's products. We were using almost twice as many pounds of elderberries per bottle than some other people.
Yeah, give me that strong stuff.
Yeah, like people would email us and they would just say, I've never actually had. They go, I always thought people meant elderberry water, and then I had your elderberry syrup.
Oh man, when my wife, it was so gross. She'd be like, "All right, time to take your, the kids are sick. Time to take your elderberry syrup." I'm like, "Oh my goodness! Like, I'd rather just die." I'm not a fan of the flavor. I don't like it at all.
Well, see, ours had great flavor as well. But
Yeah,
what was really peculiar about the elderberries we used.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
See, I could drink that stuff just for fun. So
I loved. Yeah.
Because she would make it very strong as well. Like it was not watery or anything like it was just I don't know what to say. It was just not like I love I never find it anywhere, but I love like boysenberry syrup. I feel like that used to be everywhere. Like even IHOP would have it on the table, but you don't see it around much anymore. But yeah, elderberry syrup, I just couldn't get into it.
If she was using dried elderberries, there's a lot of really bad tasting dried elderberries on the US market. So you have to be super careful where you're buying. If you have a bad tasting elderberry syrup, it's because people are buying low quality, bad tasting berries.
Oh.
So kind of, it's like the goat milk discussion from earlier. You know, handling affects everything downstream.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get
of your product. The result is from how you handled it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, but you were talking about mid-tier products. I think is what, or maybe not mid-tier. Was that the wording?
Yeah, mid-tier.
Yeah,
mid-tier.
Okay.
You know, it's hard to be a high-ticket person.
Right.
It's hard to charge $1,000 an hour or come up with a product that somebody's going to pay $3,000 for.
Right.
So that high end is hard to crack.
Yeah.
The low end is generally long-term unprofitable and bad for your family.
Right.
So I'm always, that's why Joel and I do a conference. A conference is a mid-tier thing. A ticket to a conference is $100 to a $200 ticket. Then you can throw on some VIP tickets that are $400 or $500. And you can get 200-300 customers and have enough margin to make it worth doing it. Or elderberry syrup is a $25 product, or some skincare and other products, or again, like house cleaning. In our area, because my daughter is starting a house cleaning business right now, she can charge $40 to $60 an hour to go clean somebody's house.
Dang. Yeah. I might have to get into that.
And so these are what I mean by like all of these mid-tier. I wish there was a Christian doing this, but it's a woman and she's not a Christian. Her name is Cody Sanchez. And she has a newsletter called Contrarian Thinking. And she highlights all of these really nice 6-figure semi-scalable businesses that are just perfect for us Christian families that have a lot of kids, where she's constantly highlighting these, she often refers to them as the nooks and cranny of the economy.
Right.
The house cleaning, the laundromat, the people who paint the lines on parking lots, the all of these service industries that you're driving around and you never actually take note of their existence, but they're really, really profitable businesses. And they're not all that hard to get into because they're all mid-tier.
Right. They're not high skill. You don't have to go to school to learn how to paint lines on a parking lot. You just have to know how to snap a chalk line.
Yeah.
Though perhaps some people should go to school because I've seen some pretty poorly drawn parking lots. So
some designs are better than others for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've been going for an hour and a half. Let's hit up a couple comments. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about raising children more specifically, especially talking about John. How old is your oldest?
19. So we have 19 down to 4.
Quite the spread. So one of the things that I want to talk about is finding spouses for your children. I know that's not something that you've done yet, but that you're moving into, and some of your ideas pertaining to that. But before we do, want to get into some of our comments. Sean, if you could go ahead and grab these ones on stream.
Sure. Yeah, Alex says a countdown is so professional. Who are you people? Yeah, it's funny. We've gotten comments like that where people are like, wow, it's really professional what you do. And I feel like we're really going by the seat of our pants. So I don't know what these other guys are doing that looks even jankier than what we're doing. Reform Rogue says, good evening. I've really enjoyed John Moody's X post. Great to see him on the show. Yeah, well, I mean, that's why we're all excited about him.
Yeah. And there is another comment in here. For some reason, I don't know why it is, but the Rumble comments don't come through. So we have to grab them individually. But we have a comment here from Stanley Grandin says, it's Louisville, but one syllable. So Louisville, one syllable.
Louisville.
Yeah.
That's not possible, man. It's not possible to have one syllable. I don't think he knows what a syllable is.
It's Kentucky, man.
Yeah. All right. John Carter says, John is great on homesteading, but I've benefited even more from his discussion of the relationships between men and women and exposing the silliness of Big and Mid Eva. And this is the big reason I wanted to get in the comments, because I thought this was a good comment here, because you do address quite a few different things, obviously, on social media. Everyone does. Like, nobody's just like, well, I don't know. Maybe there are guys that are just like that one guy. Like, he just does this one thing. But you have largely, you've pushed back a lot on the Mid Eva, Big Eva guys. And that's been, it's been good to see, like, some of that pushback. I can't off the top of my head think of everything that you've said, but like, I remember when you had bought this book back here, Othello, I had written in it, like, thanks for being one of the guys, or thanks for looking after the guys, or something like that, because it did feel, for a long time, it felt like we had very few people in our corner. Like, it felt like many of us in the pews at church felt like we were going to be kicked out of the church at any moment, just for, going against post-war consensus, not even anything crazy, but just talking about regular stuff. I mean, there's guys on the big Twitter dust up one of the big ones right now is people saying that women shouldn't be voting. And apparently that's like the 11th commandment, is that women need to be able to vote, which is crazy, because like democracy isn't even in the Bible. And then, so of course, like, women voting isn't in the Bible either.
Well, the old joke I have is democracy appears one time in the Bible, and they chose Barabbas.
They chose Barabbas.
Yeah, they chose Barabbas over
that's
Christ.
Pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, it's a joke, but it's also true. Yeah.
Well, it's funny though, because when you were talking about oikonomia is we're talking about the word that economy comes from is house and law. And like, it's where, so it's almost redundant to say like home economics. Like, I was just maybe at the point in school where home economics still was a class. I would be surprised if it's still a class, but traditionally, all you kids watching, there used to be a class that was taught in public schools called home economics, and they would teach you how to like bake cakes and balance a checkbook and all this kind of stuff. And it was, the Apostle Paul uses the word oikodespotos to talk about a woman, like her role, and it's to be it's where we get the word despot from, like a what is the synonym for despot? I can't
like a tyrant.
Tyrant. There you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're like the tyrant of the house. You're ruling over the house. And so I think some people will hear that and say, well, no, that means that the woman's in charge or something, but it's not. It's being in charge of the home economics of the thing. So I've been a big proponent of that for a long time. I don't know how you feel about it, but like, my wife handles, like, it's not literally a checkbook, but I'll say handles a checkbook because I don't know a better way of describing that, but she handles the home economics. So I'll go to work and make the money, and you bring home the bacon, put it on the mantle, and present it to everyone, and then she distributes the bacon, cooks it, and all that kind of stuff. That's how I feel. A lot of guys will be like, no, I don't let my wife touch the money. That's crazy. But
well, it depends on your family situation.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
my mom is very stressed out by money. The managing of it, the thinking about it. It's not because I mean, I didn't grow up rich, but there were a few times in my life when it was like we were eating ketchup and bologna sandwiches because that's what we could afford. But for most of my life, especially once I became a teenager and my dad got out of the army and he was being paid to be a doctor in the private sector, we were living quite comfortably. But my mom just really stressed about money. So my dad did all of the money. But even with my dad handling the money, he would still be like, okay, you have X amount of money for groceries. And then I'll handle, the water bill, the electric bill, getting the septic cleaned out, all that kind of stuff, the day-to-day expenses. But she was still the one who went shopping and planned the meals. And she was the one who determined a lot of things that were money related, that required money. And she was still very much, this despotos, oiko despotos, despot of the house, determining day to day what are the things that we're going to do in any given 7-day period.
So, real quick, just to deal with the Greek words, by the time you get to the New Testament period, that root on the end, despote, is not a strong word. Doug Wilson, I think, is who really popularized the connection between the modern word despot and then Paul's use of despotes. But it's a linguistic fallacy to take the way we understand a root in modern times and assume it had the same force in the original language. If you look at the other uses of that word, it, by that point in Greco-Roman history, it basically took on the meaning of a manager.
Right.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like it definitely doesn't mean it doesn't mean servant, but I mean it doesn't mean like
we're not
Mao
going
Zedong or something like that.
We're not going full Gilder here either. The wife doesn't tell the husband what to do.
I think
kind of the direction Doug Wilson goes.
Yeah, I think he does. Unfortunately, I think a few quotes I've seen. I think a good way to see it is it's like the woman is a house overseer, and if you read Xenophon's Oikonomos, the way he discusses the role of men and women. So, and I love what you said, Jeff. There's some different ways these duties are going to be chopped up based on the gifts of the husband and wife, the busyness level of each husband and wife, and other factors. And the other thing is, though, there's so many things that people really don't need to do anymore. It's like, why do you spend so much time paying bills? All of our bill paying can be automated now, and you just need to check on it. So many of these time-consuming tasks don't need to be anymore if you're actually running your house well with the tools we now have available. So there's a lot of ways a family can faithfully divide up the duties as long as the man is still actually leading. Yeah. What I don't like to see is a man who works and the wife creates the budget, where the man has basically abdicated that duty of, because a budget is a reflection of your family's vision and priorities and other things. So the budget is by nature something that the man should be shaping and offering, not that no one else in the family gets input, but budgeting is a leadership thing. Executing the budget can be a management thing primarily. So as long as we still have the fact that men aren't abdicating duties that are there onto their wife, how some of the nuts and bolts get assembled, each family is going to work out for themselves.
Yeah, I'll give an example of kind of what I was saying was, like grocery shopping. Like I'm not going to tell my wife, buy the following things, like maybe like one or two items. I'm like, hey, we're low on whatever. But she's going to naturally understand what the house needs more than I will, or what sometimes she'll tell me the current price of a product. And I'm like, what? It was only this much 2 years ago. And like, it just, she's going to naturally know that stuff better because she's the one that does the grocery shopping. And because I just don't have the time for that.
Yeah.
Like if she's at home, she's a stay-at-home mom. So, I mean, she has the time to be able to go out and go grocery shopping. So I think it's things like that I'm saying, like she's a good manager of the money in that regard. Like, I don't have the time to not be able to delegate those duties. Like, that's a big, like in the Army, I remember a conversation that some NCOs were having where they were saying this one E6 was like, yeah, man, I just got all this work now and I'm here late and whatever. He's like, dude, by the time you're that high up, you should just be telling people to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you shouldn't be doing really anything but telling other people what to do.
Yeah.
And
I tell this man go and he goes. I tell this man come and he,
right. So I get that. That's where I'm going with.
That's
like
the relationship we should be having with our kids too. You know, where the purpose of having kids is to have a productive household, but ultimately to teach them to run their own productive household. So the direction that we're trying to utilize these businesses is not just to keep ourselves afloat, but also to provide a future for future generations that they can have a successful household of their own.
Speaking of successful households, Jeff, you wanted to talk about arranged marriages, probably is where you were going with that. But
well, that's certainly a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I know not everybody's very fond of it, but when it comes to getting your children married, you know, teaching them the skills to run a household of their own so that they can grow up and get married. And you know, there's a very bizarre double standard that my dad and my father-in-law, independent of each other, like to point out, which is when it comes to getting your children married, you know, pastors love to say when a man needs to get married, he needs to, you know, have a job, have a skill set that he can produce, can provide. He needs to, you know, have a vehicle, have, you know, a house, hopefully. That's getting more and more untenable as time goes by. But then Doug Wilson quite famously said, and a girl should be able to cook multiple recipes from scratch.
Well, that actually wasn't Doug. That was somebody part of Moscow. Was his name Ben Zorns or something?
Oh, was it? Okay.
I had a Facebook post that went viral because I mockingly, you know, I took his screenshot.
Right.
And then, you know, I said, you know, men spend 2.5 decades busting your tail to finally be able to get married. Girls spend a couple afternoons the week before the wedding watching the cooking channel.
yeah,
Because that was the gulf of expectation. Utter insanity.
yeah.
There's not much, you know, there's not much management going on in that setup. You know, she's not learning to be, as it were, a tyrant of the household, a manager of the things put in her stead. She's just there to kind of produce a little and keep things amenable for the guy who's doing all the heavy lifting. And just a really bizarre double standard. But, you know, what do you think are, you know, if you had your top 5 things, everybody knows, right? A guy, if he wants to get married, he needs to have a job. He needs to, you know, be productive in his job, something that makes money, not just something that's fun to do, although that's a nice thing, but, you know, something productive, right? A durable trade. He needs to have assets of some sort so that he can provide for this family, shelter, you know, transportation, right? And then, you know, a couple other things. He needs to be at least good enough with relationships that he's not driving his wife up a wall all the time. Right. What are the things that you would say, you know, top 5 skills for men and women going into marriage that you think are really necessary for us to be inculcating in our own children?
Yeah. So the first one that I think generally is lacking, and you've touched on, is how men and women need to understand and relate to each other. So I forget where I first heard this, but basically the person was saying one reason so many men struggle in marriage is because they've never been taught how to handle a woman's strong emotions. We can say this on your podcast, can't say it other places, even though everybody admits
you can say a lot on this podcast.
Yeah.
But women are strongly emotional creatures. I come from an unbelieving family. My mom and dad divorced or separated somewhere between 6 and 8 times between when I was born and my junior year of high school.
What?
My childhood was like an episode of Judge Judy meets an episode of Cops and gets mixed in with As the World Turns.
Oh no.
My childhood was crazy. So one of the things, but then I go into church culture, and how you relate to women in church culture is, well, happy wife, happy life.
Yeah,
you're
let
just
her
not serving her enough.
Yeah.
And
bad man, bad you. Humble yourself.
Why did you make your wife feel that way? What's wrong with you?
There was a fellow that I know who went into marriage counseling. His wife had an affair, like went out, had sex with a guy that was not him. Instead of divorcing her, he's like, let's go to the pastor, let's have marriage counseling. And he gets in there and the pastor just starts unloading on him, like, how could you have made her feel so desperate that she felt the need to go do this? And he's sitting there like, what are you talking about? I work hard, I provide for my family. That's not to say I'm perfect, but I did not incite a sexual affair in my wife because of mismanagement. This is not my fault. And you can surmise from the kind of counsel he was getting, things did not go well. They did get divorced, and he ended up going to a different church, and she continued to be a member at that church, although she remained unchurched. At least that was the last I had heard of it. It's been a couple of years since I talked to him. But this idea that it's like, well, if she's misbehaving, somehow that's your fault.
Yeah, I think it was on Samuel Say's tweet from today in response to Rhett Koppel. One guy wrote, God forbid women take any responsibility for their actions. And the observation I made on what he said is, many men exist solely to ensure that women never have to take any responsibility for their actions. And they make large amounts of money and create large platforms doing so.
Right.
Preach.
Right.
It's such an, so this issue, I'm really thankful for John Michael Clark. If you've ran across him, his stuff is just integral. Because again, even in church environments, we live in churches where most of the pastors are ashamed of what the Bible has to say about women. This was my fundamental discovery in the 2000s about evangelicalism. If you really want to know what the heart of American evangelicalism is, it is a bunch of men who are ashamed of what the Bible says when they're teaching it.
Right.
Especially what it says about women. So they are of no help in terms of intersexual dynamics, because they basically view men and women, and this is why they have such a hard time upholding scripture, is they don't view men and women as fundamentally different. They don't believe men and women are fundamentally ontologically oriented differently. Therefore, it's well, why can't women be pastors? Because God's mean, and we're not mean like God, and we feel so we're going to let you have every other leadership position possible because we're not mean like God. They just don't understand that. No, the Bible teaches women are not fit for leadership in general. This is Paul's argument, by the way, that tons of people just don't take seriously. I think it's in Timothy. Paul argues from greater to lesser. So Paul argues from creation itself that there is this dynamic that women are not to be authorities over men because men were created first and women were created for men. And then he applies it to the church. But the church, but it's a universal, it's a creational truth that certainly should be true in the church. It's not merely a truth for the church, or a truth for the home. So it always kills me when that passage is basically castrated.
Yeah, there was a guy someone out of Moscow. I don't remember exactly who it was, but well, a lot of guys out of Moscow they'll say that woman's glory is like God's glory squared, right? Because have you heard that one? Yeah, you look like your eyes just fell out of your head, rolling them back. Because they'll say that, and their whole idea is like when Paul says that man is the glory of God and woman is the glory of man. They'll say, see, it's like it's compounded. But like me and some other guys were like, does that mean that man is more glorious than God?
That
like,
is the logical.
If that's your whole point, is that woman's more glorious than man? Like, so it makes no sense. Like they've come up with these crazy. It's not just Moscow, but they need to hear. Like they've come up with some crazy ideas of the differences between man and woman, and they don't fall on the being too strict against women. Ironically, because they're known on CNN, this is the big bad Christian nationalist guy. And he's gonna put women in chains and make them breeding machines and whatever. But he's like, nobody in Moscow is all that conservative on this one issue. And I know, like, people, some people are gonna clutch their pearls over me saying that, but it's true. How can you say something like woman is God's glory squared? Because you've totally missed the point of that.
Yeah. Well, a bunch of, there was a recent dust up when they were sending a young woman to work in DC, and they were celebrating this young woman who's right at prime marriage age.
Yeah.
And sending her into Washington, D.C. instead, and saying like, this is a triumph for Christianity and for women. I'm like, this is just second wave feminism.
Yeah.
So
yeah, their push against third wave feminism is second wave feminism.
Yeah, it really. Well, again, you see this in a lot of things. I've written on this a bunch, that, and a lot of it's driven by their eschatology and their ecclesiology, but different issue, different day. How late do we go, by the way?
We can be here for as long as you need us to be here. A typical show is 2 hours, but we can go as long as 3 hours.
We've gone 3 hours, yeah.
Well, I'd rather do another show sometime because it's now over an hour past my bedtime.
Oh, no. Okay.
And so since we got church in the morning, I want to make sure I get to bed.
I'm
an hour later in history than you.
Yes.
So I'd say
we are living in the future. There's just one thing that I wanted to hit real quick, and that was, on the subject of women not being it's not allowable for women to be held accountable. Here is this post today or this week from JD Hall. Let's see. Let me pop on here. Actually, let me share this one instead. Start from the beginning. Protestia, which is predominantly JD Hall, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't realize that's him.
Better to marry a former OF, that's OnlyFans model, who has come to know the depths of her sin and the mercy of the Lord than an unkissed virgin with a haughty look and a proud heart. And on its face, this is obviously absurd.
Yes.
The idea that a woman and her, the things that she has done in her past are not as bad as being proud or haughty. Thomas Accord made a very good point about this. He said, it's like these people have never read Shakespeare. Have you never read The Taming of the Shrew? The whole point of that story is that you can take a haughty virgin and turn her into a good wife. All right, and this is not to white knight about the sins of women. It is some sins are less egregious than others.
Yeah.
And a virginal, proud heart is not more of a problem than a woman who has been a literal professional whore.
Yeah.
And
Like she got paid to do sex acts.
yeah, and I mean, it's one thing to say, a woman can be redeemed. She absolutely can, but the consequences of her actions live on.
Well,
Go ahead.
and so much of this it's what I wrote about on a few posts. No one will bat an eye if when you talk about men and their sins, you say there's ongoing consequences.
Correct.
So you murdered some people. Now you're in jail for life. Well, you're going to be doing jail ministry, dude. You shouldn't have murdered people.
Yeah, precisely.
So predominantly male sins. Oh, you were a pedophile, or you had child porn on your computer and it wasn't planted there by the CIA.
Yeah.
Which is a thing that is done, by the way.
You were caught doing this. You will never be allowed with children alone again. And a woman may never marry you. And nobody is going to feel much pity for the man there that he's getting his comeuppance for the sins he engaged in. But as soon as you say certain sins of women may have ongoing consequences to the quality of the rest of their life, because again, these fundamental dynamics we have going on in mid-Eva and big Eva, and then in the culture at large, people will poop their pants. They will fall over backwards to fight you to death over this. And a bunch of people all over socials showed the absurdity of Hall and Protestia's post by just citing a bunch of male sins and how, if you were a drunkard for years and now you have liver psoriasis, trusting in Christ doesn't change it. It's great that you trusted. And the one post I wrote, it also, it cheapens grace and it distorts the gospel when we act as if sins don't have ongoing costs. We know guys in our circle who, for whatever reason, wasted a decade of their life playing video games instead of working hard. They're going to have a lower net worth probably for their entire life. Repenting of that sin does not undo the damage the sin has done economically to that man. We know guys in our circles who let themselves get up to 250 and 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Repenting of gluttony doesn't now mean they're going to be able to marry as an attractive girl, possibly. It doesn't mean they're not going to have downstream radically increased risks of diseases because they spent a decade at 300 pounds. Like when it's a guy, nobody bats an eye saying, yeah, these things are going to last. These are going to leave lasting marks on you. And praise God, you've repented of them. And praise God, when Christ returns, these things are all going to be set to right. But with women, they have to be set to right now. Women get a special dispensation where they don't have to wait for the return of Christ to enjoy this. So, and it's totally unacceptable. It's a perversion of what the Bible teaches. And then it's bad for women because one of the graces of this life that Tolkien and Lewis and so many great writers have written about is the ongoing pain of our sin breeds humility. It breeds perseverance. And it's the true ground of hope.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I just know because of sins in my life, because of what I went through with my family, there are just things that are never going to be quite right for me in this life. And that drives me to look forward to the return of Christ, to look forward to a time. Again, we want women to have every tear wiped away now,
Right.
instead of at Christ's return.
It also should motivate us to teach our children not to repeat the mistakes we made.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because if the mistakes don't have a cost, especially if it's just like a
Precisely.
little slap on the hand, there is no true warning for these sins.
Correct.
For women,
Yeah.
at least.
And that is what you're teaching them. When you teach these girls, hey, you can go be a college slut, you can go be a floozy, you can go run around and still, you know, have your come to Jesus, I've repented, trust me, bro, moment, and then still marry a top tier guy, a guy who did not have a bunch of girlfriends in high school that he got pregnant and who had abortions, a guy who is productive and has a job and has a house and has 2 cars in his driveway. When you teach her that she can do that, you're incentivizing that behavior. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a lie. And J.D. Hall knows it's a lie. And here is something that I wanted to show. Now, it's not the easiest to read because it's kind of small font, but I'll read off some of what's going on here. So J.D. says, in the last 24 hours, I've heard lots of people identify with the parents of the godly, chaste young man looking for a virginal bride in Protesti's hypothetical scenario, but I've not seen anybody identify with the parents of the repentant young woman, blah, 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 Jesus juke, right? Breaking idols, and he is a bit vulgar here. He says, I simply don't want to marry a woman who has had 60 partners, I'll say. I also think young men can have standards. Also, I don't want an STD. And his response is, well, it was good enough for your dad, and you're okay. Right? So he's descending into just a very cheap insult, right? Oh, well, your mom's a whore.
Yeah.
Right. And he has apologized for this statement. You know, he says it's not my proudest moment. I shouldn't have said that. And, you know, icing on the cake, Breaking Idols this weekend is at his mom's funeral.
Yeah.
So like just couldn't have timed it worse. But, you know, it was good enough for your dad and you turned out fine, right? He says your mom's a whore. So his very own sentiment on this proves that what he said was a lie. You know, several people have pointed this out. I said, you know, such a statement proves not just the falsity of his entire premise, but that he knows its untruth is simply lying. Sean, if it's a sick burn to say it, that means there's something wrong with it.
Yeah.
Right? If it really is an insult to say your mom was a whore, but she repented and turned out to be a good mom anyway. If that is an insult, then obviously there's something wrong with it. Some lasting consequence of this thing. Obviously, it's not a consequenceless behavior. Obviously, being an OnlyFans professional internet whore is worse than being a virginal, haughty spirit, you know, a shrew. Being an untamed shrew.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to close this off because my son has been listening and I want him to get to bed as well for church.
Yeah.
The thing that really concerns me here as well is this is something, I forget which pastor taught me this years ago, but he said one of the truest signs of repentance is a joyful bearing up under the cost of your sin. A truly repentant person does not seek to minimize how much their sin has hurt others and how much work, restitution, and making it right. And you see this, it might have been in a Puritan book I was reading on 1 Corinthians 7, where Paul says, look at your zeal, look at your acceptance of this discipline, you know, There's a godly sorrow that leads to grief, or not a godly. There's a worldly sorrow that leads to grief, and there's a godly sorrow that leads to repentance. And this Puritan pastor is just talking about, one way we help these girls actually be sure that they are truly repentant is by not minimizing that these sins have real ongoing costs.
Right. Yep. That is the untimely truth. The unpopular truth is there is a consequence for sin in this life, and the purpose of those consequences, God gives us those consequences, and the purpose of it is to inoculate our society against those things, to incentivize us to teach our kids not to be like that. So we really appreciate you coming on, folks.
Before you go, I have to do the thing I always do with people like yourself. Follow me on Twitter. Why are you not following me on Twitter? I've done that before. I did that with the other Paul. I was like, dude, you're always in the live stream. Follow me on Twitter. So that is my appeal to you.
All right. Yeah. So John, if you're not following Sean, follow him. If you're not following me, follow me. But we really appreciate you being on here, and we hope that this has been beneficial, folks. To those of you who are watching, follow John Moody on Twitter. His tag is @resisfertile. So resistance is fertile. RESISFERTILE. Follow him on Twitter. And do you have a website where you post your conferences and things that people should be aware of?
Rogue Food Conference is the conference for our, Rogue Food Conference, where we do food, health, farming, a whole bunch of stuff that touches on this. And then I theoretically have a personal website called johnwmoody.com that's usually down half the time I check it, because I gotta fix a few things there.
Just a few things.
All right. Well, folks, follow John on Twitter. Friend him on Facebook. If he likes you, he will follow back, or he'll accept your friend request. But look up the Rogue Food Conference, ROGUE, Rogue Food Conference. And thanks, John, for coming on. We really appreciate you being here, and hope that you have a wonderful night, and that you're well rested for church tomorrow. We really appreciate you spending.
Look forward to seeing you soon, Sean. I might be coming back to Dallas Fort Worth in November.
Ooh, nice.
So you might get to pick up a homeless man again.
Heck yeah!
All right.
There we go.
Well, I'll make the trek up there. It's a 2-hour drive for me, but it's very, very worth it every time I do. All right. Well, thank you, sir, and have a wonderful night.
Great. Thanks, brothers.
All right. Well, folks, we will finish out the comments. We will not leave you all hanging. And
I did, before you get into comments, I had some things that I thought were pertinent.
Go ahead.
I'd seen a meme that I thought really put everything into perspective. And it was just like a one panel thing of a guy. It was like, wow, now that I'm 30 and I've got all this money and a house and all this, I can't wait to marry a single mother and raise her kids for her, because that's how these people act. I obviously don't go on Tinder. I don't know when that first started, but I had only even heard about it after I was already married. So I have no idea what the vibe is actually like there, but I see a lot of people post like screenshots of just these crazy demands that single mothers have.
Yeah.
I'm ready for love.
6'5".
Yeah.
Must have a 6-digit income.
Yeah. Just crazy things. Or they'll ask like women on the street, those interviews where they're like, hey, how do you, and they'll ask them like, what do you think the average man makes in a year?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll just say crazy things like 200,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you think an average man makes in a year? That's insane.
I'd love to be an average man making 200,000 a year.
Boy,
yeah,
wouldn't I also?
And then there was another one where a guy was doing interviews, talking to girls just on the Strand, probably in Miami or LA, one of these places with lots of rich people. And he's just asking random girls, what do you think the qualifications are for a guy before you date him, not even marry him, mind you. This is, loose sexual, loose sexual relationships that are just come and go. And one of these girls said, well, he should own a yacht. And he asked her, how many men do you think, what percentage of men in the world or in the United States do you think own a yacht? And she said, I don't know, maybe 20%. And he said, 20%? She said, well, yeah, I mean, not everybody, it's got to be a small portion of the population who own a yacht. He said, 20%. And he pulled it up on his phone. He said, look, the percentage of people in the world who own a yacht is 0.000001. Like there were 5 zeros. He said, and the number of guys who in the US own a yacht, it goes up by a bit, but it was still multiple zeros, 0.0% of people who own a yacht. Just this insanely minute number. And she had this idea that, well, if I'm going to date a guy, he has to be in this top, not just top 1%, but just insanely wealthy. But the it's
the next question,
street, right? Because the guys who own yachts, they're going through the girls like they're a pair of socks, right?
Of course.
They're not settling down. So this girl probably has dated multiple guys who own yachts, but he would never marry her.
Yeah.
So she's going to get run through by all these super rich guys who wouldn't want to live with her. Heaven forbid that I live with this woman for the rest of my life. She's just a thing that I'm playing with. But then, people in the church will treat that kind of behavior like, well, now that her body resembles a sack of meat that's been battered and bruised by every guy that she's ever touched, now it's time for her to settle down. It's time for you, young man, to man up and marry her and make a wife and mother out of her. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't touch her. Don't even look at her.
The next question that I would have asked was, how many men have you slept with who didn't have a yacht?
Yeah.
Like, how many guys did you just give it away for free? And it's funny when people say, I've always, since I heard this at a very young age, there was some sitcom or something where someone was like, my sister's a whore or something. And like, mom's like, don't call your sister a whore. Whores get paid. And like ever since I heard that, it stuck with me. But then I read it in Ezekiel. Ezekiel says that. Yeah. So like,
yeah. There's a passage in the Bible where it says, these women are so degenerate, so degrading of themselves that they refuse to accept payment.
Yeah.
They're just giving themselves away for free.
Yeah. Crazy.
I mean, just
crazy.
But if you despise that behavior, and if you don't want to marry that woman after she's, after she's, hit the wall and decided that it's time for her to settle down and marry some nice guy that she'll never be satisfied with. Well, if you don't want that for yourself, then you're just some some upstart prude. And I can't believe that you would have such a high standard. I can't believe you.
Yeah. I remember a very pivotal moment. It was a conversation I had with somebody. It was when I was at CBU, and it was the first time. So it was before I joined the Army. And I was talking with him. It was a group of us, and he said, like, I would never date a woman who didn't have Christian parents. And I, being, I guess Christian orphan boy type thing, where I didn't grow up in church. I started going when I was 13. It was because the guy who lived across the street was the associate pastor at the church. So to me, I was just like, like clutching my pearls about, what do you mean you would never date someone? And he said, I only get to have one wife, and I should be able to be as selfish as I want with that decision. And that conversation really stuck with me, because before that conversation, I had this idea like I am owed equal ground with every other guy. But from that woman's perspective, why would she pick, if she gets this one opportunity in her whole life, ideally, obviously, people don't, assuming you don't like die young or something like that, like you get this one opportunity to pick this person that, that's going to be who all of your descendants descend from.
For all of history.
For all of history, you can never take that back. There's no way to dilute that out. It's there. It's always going to be there. And you have to be selfish with that decision. And so after that conversation, it hit me and I was like, why would a woman want to pick me? And then of course the next step was like, what do I have to do to be that guy that a woman would want to pick? Now this isn't the same. I mean, this goes for women as well, right? Like before you make that decision, think about, why would a guy pick you when you're living this kind of life? You had mentioned the wall. The Wall, for those who, I'm sure everyone knows that, but it's not just an amazing Pink Floyd album. It's also when women get to a certain stage in their life, usually around 30, maybe 35, even younger than that.
It depends.
It's going to depend on the woman.
It's the mileage.
That's a good way of putting it, because there's a point where women, they can see that they're losing a step. The competition's getting younger.
They no longer look like a beautiful high school, college age hottie.
Yeah. Right? Like Garth Brooks said, the competition's getting younger.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what's going on. They start to see that they've now hit that wall, so they can't just get by in life on their looks. They have to be actually, useful for something. And the number one thing that women are useful for, that men can't get anywhere else. If you ever ask yourself that, what is the one thing that men can't do by themselves? Have kids.
Reproduce.
That's it. You can't reproduce by yourself. You need a wife for that one reason. And that used to be the way that we would think about marriage. I mean, if that's why in the Bible, I think we talked about this last week, you have, I'm going to go and take a wife for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why? It's not just because you're lonely. I mean, you've got friends, right? You got your slaves that can make your sandwiches or whatever, but it's because you cannot reproduce without that woman. And so why, and
especially in this day and age when illicit materials are so easily had.
Yeah.
A guy can get his rocks off anytime he wants, practically anywhere. It's
practically anywhere. That's a little morbid, bro.
It's true. I mean, you have a mobile phone in your pocket. It doesn't get much more mobile than that.
Yeah.
And that thing has access to any woman that you could ever want to look at in any kind of suggestive way. I mean, the advent of AI is just making this easier too. So, I mean, if he can get his satisfaction from any girl, why would he actually want to marry a woman? And it's because he wants to actually spend his life with her and raise godly children. For what purpose did God institute marriage? To raise a godly offspring. That really is what it's all about. It's about the next generation.
Yep. Some might even say for future generations.
Some might say. All
right. I know we're itching to get to comments. We got a lot of comments tonight. Should I start with this one you got starred here? That does seem to be the
we showed it on the screen, but I wanted to read it out just because.
Yeah. Must have been nice having money for baloney. Yeah.
Wow. Some days money is tight. Yeah. My dad used to talk about when he was a kid that there were some times when money was tight and they would eat ketchup sandwiches, and he set it as a goal in his life that his kids would never have to face that. But during the Clinton campaign, there were a lot of government shutdowns. And one of the results of government shutdowns is the military was not getting paid. So there was a decent period of time when he didn't have any money at all. He was not getting paid a lot of money. He was working his way through medical school in the Army. He was a butter bar. And, all of a sudden, not only is he not making a lot of money, but he's not getting paid the money he was making. And, it was a very difficult time. My younger siblings have no memory of that, whatever. But there was a time in my life when I was a poor kid. But even at that low point, my dad made sure that he had money for bologna. So very greatly blessed by my dad, who worked very hard and planned very efficiently to make sure that always happened for us.
Yeah, that almost happened to me when I was in Afghanistan. Congress was like, we're just not going to pay the military. And we were all just sitting around like, are we about to just like fight our way back home? Like, is that what we're about to do? Because I ain't sticking around here for free. So that was a crazy time. We have Sockeye Grooming Company. We got a groomer in the chat. He says, I can attest it's true. Never was raised to know how to handle women's emotions. And I had a sister in a broken home where I stayed primarily with my mom. I think this is in reference to something John Moody had said. But yeah, you have to know how to handle women's emotions. I grew up, my grandfather had built a wood shop with his bare hands and his bare feet. And he really did. He built himself a wood shop. And that was where he would go. So he would like, if my grandmother was being crazy, as she was wont to do, and would just like be emotional or whatever, he would go to his wood shop. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'd see him in there. I'm like, oh, Papa's in his wood shop, let's see what's going on, because you always want to see him building something. But I'm like, what are you working on? Oh, I'm just getting away from your grandmother, like she's in one of her moods. Oh, okay, I get it. Like, so I've always thought that was I grew up thinking that's an appropriate response. I still think that's an appropriate response.
Yeah.
If you just let me walk away so that you can get yourself into adult mode again. And then when I come back, we can talk. Like, I'm not going to sit here and hear you rant and raving.
Sometimes, you need some space, and male only spaces are a good thing.
Yep.
If it's going out to the wood shop, if it's going for a walk just to cool off a little bit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this next comment, I see Jeff is well prepared for this comment. You'll see in a second. Sockeye Grooming Company says, speaking of Moscow, I can't believe they allowed Jewish Darren, how do you pronounce that? Doan? Mm-hmm. Darren Doan to say it's incest to marry a woman of your own race. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They didn't just allow it; they celebrated it, and
they loved that quote from him, and they thought it was such a good thing for him to say. Yep. John Carter says, not only that, he said, if you want your grandkids to look like you, you should commit incest with your own daughter.
Yep. And
that is correct. That is precisely what he said on the Cross Politics show. He said, and I quote from Darren Doan, just have sex with your daughter and just keep reproducing what you love. So that was his response. If you want your grandkids to look like you, just have incest with your own child. So, if that's those are the principles of Moscow. These behold your king, folks. Yeah. If you're following Moscow, this is what they're promoting. This is what they think is good. This is what they think is funny. Degenerates like this fellow who think that it is funny and think that it is appropriate to accuse good, godly men of being absolute sexual degenerates because they want something that God said is good for their own children. That is what Moscow represents. They want to geld the young men and then command them be fruitful. They want to geld the young men and command them be fruitful, just like C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, who they love so much, would have hated what Moscow stands for today. You can talk about, the LCMS would excommunicate Martin Luther. It's just, you are of your fathers who killed the prophets, just like the Pharisees. They're of their father, the devil. They are the descendants of their fathers who murdered the prophets. And now you celebrate their graves. People like Moscow love Tolkien and Lewis and the great thinkers of the last century. But if they were alive today, they would hate them.
What else we got? This one, John, that's wicked and blatantly anti-white and anti-everybody else. Yep.
Yeah, it's not just anti-white. It's how would I say this biblically? The enemies of all mankind.
Yeah, crazy. This is a good comment. John Carter, friend of the show, says, I've been asking repeatedly for anyone to name 3 humble and contrite former OnlyFans models, but I'd settle for one. So far, it doesn't seem that even one exists. Yeah, interestingly enough, my buddy Thaddeus, who is sometimes in the chat, he had sent me this video, and he was like, bro, I don't know how this came up on my YouTube feed or whatever, but it was like a clip from this show where it is like former stars of that genre in some respect. I don't know what exactly, but the idea was there were former bad girls, now good Christian girls. And in the clip, like, it was like one of the women would just like make these very intimate noises, but they were like talking about scripture. And it was just like it was still built in there. She wasn't trying like trying to be weird, but like it just naturally, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And that's what is still in her heart. Like we have this idea like someone's just going to boom, flip the switch. And it doesn't happen like that.
Yeah. Sanctification is progressive.
Yes.
And, that's not to say that there isn't a place for these women.
Sure.
There are young men who should marry these women.
Yes.
But they're not young men who have been raised in the church. They're young men who have been converted out of, drug lifestyles, out of gang membership, things along those lines. This is equitable. And the thing is, someone who's fair to both sexes can look at this and say, yeah, there are sins in your past that will affect your future and affect your standing among your fellows. And how many of these people who are fathers of virginal, virtuous daughters raised in the church, never had a boyfriend in high school, kept themselves pure, know how to manage a household well? How many of them would marry that daughter to some guy who was a meth head, whose teeth are all rotted out because he was a meth head and a meth dealer, and he became a Christian in prison? Went to prison for 7 years, became a Christian, came out, and he's a new man. He isn't what he used to be, and fully cognizant of the fact that this man is not what he used to be. How many of them would say, oh yeah, you're qualified to marry my daughter? None of them. Zero. None of them. These fathers are turning up their noses at the best men our society is producing right now and saying they're not good enough.
Yeah.
You think they're going to marry them to some guy who's on a road to recovery, who is progressively being sanctified out of a very bad past? No, they would never. They never would. Just like that post with J.D. Hall, where he snidely and disgustingly accuses a man's mother of being a whore. They know deep down in their heart that these sins have lasting consequences, but they want to pretend that women are some special thing that they can never face consequences for their behavior. And it's preposterous.
Yeah, it's this is one of those issues where when it came up, when I saw that Protestia, I think is what those people are called. I saw when they posted that, I was like, okay, that was kind of lame. When I saw JD Hall defending it, that's when I knew this was going to blow up. And this is one of those issues where I kind of fall like in the middle. like that's my comfortable spot, is being the most liberal guy in the room.
Hold on.
Like-
Let me find the middle.
Yeah, I don't look for it, but I feel like I'm sure you've felt that too, like in the group chat. Like there'll be something where people are like staunchly this, and I can acknowledge that is a very, very conservative position, but I find myself somewhere to the left of that, not like PCUSA left, but I find myself in the middle on some of this stuff. So as far as the redemption kind of aspect goes, I think everybody's on board with the general idea of it. I think the issue is that they're minimalizing the continued consequences of that behavior. And it's not always STDs. It's not always abortions or something like that. A lot of it is just the mental connection that you make naturally with a person when you have intercourse. Like, it's for guy, we have a lot of friends who they're not married, they're still virgins. And man, I remember the first time I heard somebody like really explaining that to me, and this was, like, this is like basic training or something like that. These guys, because you know how those guys are. Man, I was with so many women, it was crazy. But this one dude, it was this one like Chad White dude, was like, man, that like the connection that he was like emotional about, like one woman in particular who he had intercourse with, and like him explaining that to me, I was like, man, like, is this really like that? And yeah, it is. Like, it will stick with you for life. I mean, that's why people pair off the way that we do. I mean, you really do. And so all that to say, you can fry that sensor in your brain by
absolutely
just pairing off with
too many people,
woman after woman, or if it's a woman with guy after guy. And I think that a lot of guys, because we're less emotional or whatever, like they think that kind of bond won't exist with them, but it does. It's either you fry it, you completely ruin it, and you'll never be able to make that connection again, or you'll just have these memories of that person, these feelings of that person who's not around anymore.
And it gets in the way of the relationship you're currently in.
Yes. I don't think those are the kind of things that we should be talking about, not necessarily like STDs or whatever, though that can occur.
Yeah. I mean, I had a pastor and a youth pastor who independently of each other, they didn't know each other, but they used the same example of a piece of tape. Get a piece of Scotch tape, stick it to the back of your hand, peel it off, stick it to your other hand, peel it off, hand it to somebody else, they stick it to the back of their hand, peel it off. By the time you've gone to 7 people, that tape doesn't stick.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not sticking eventually to anything.
Yeah.
All right. And if you've got some girl who's had partners in the double digits, much less the triple digits, and rude awakening, guys, these girls today,
nasty.
they're hitting triple digits.
Nasty.
Okay. And if you have daughters, you need to protect them from this. You need to keep them off of Instagram. Don't let them have a phone. Same with your sons. Don't let them have a phone. Don't let them be on these websites that promote this. Snapchat is absolutely designed with in mind promotion of sexual degeneracy in children.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That is the purpose of that app. If you know anybody who has a Snapchat, all right, they are in sexual sin. Just full stop.
Well, hold on. I have a Snapchat. My wife sends me pictures of the kids and whatever. That's what I use it for. I mean, that's the only reason I have it, because my wife likes to send pictures of the kids. So
your wife sends you pictures, huh?
Yeah.
But my point is, the purpose of an app that deletes a picture after a certain amount of time and does not let you record it is so that you can have illicit pictures sent back and forth, seemingly with no consequence. That's the purpose of it. Okay. And you've got to be protecting your kids from this, because they are coming for your children. And they've said as much. It is their purpose to destroy your children. They want you dead. They want your children raped, and they think it's funny.
All this to say this is where I think I fall to the left of our guys on this specific issue. Is now that I'm at this stage of my life and at this age, like if something, God forbid, were to happen to my wife and I had to remarry again, a lot of these things just wouldn't matter to me. Like I understand, like it can, you know, if this woman's like fully repentant and she's got this past, like I get it. I mean, I'd even do like the Brady Bunch thing where, you know, you bring your kids and I bring my kids and this group must somehow form a family and like that. So that
yours, mine, and ours. Yeah.
Right. I think that is where I might fall to the left. Or, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm just saying at different stages of my life, that kind of stuff started to mean less to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like it didn't bother me as much.
I'm in a similar position. I'm a married man. I've been married for coming up on 10 years. If my wife, heaven forfend, were to die, I mean, I would not, you know, necessarily draw the line at, oh, she can never have had a partner of any sort. But she's still going to be the mother of my children.
Right.
You know, there are still standards that I'll have. And, you know, I've never been with anybody except my own wife. So that's kind of what I would be looking for is, you know, I'm not going to say that I wouldn't, you know, snatch up, you know, I turned 35, my wife dies. I wouldn't turn around and snatch up some young, beautiful 20-year-old, you know, happens all the time. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but also be open to marrying a woman who is a widow with a few children or a widow who didn't have children, things along those lines, because that is where God puts you in time. You know, you have to assess your position. And there's my brother-in-law, his dad was in a car accident with the whole family. His mom died. His father did remarry, married a woman who was his own age, who had never been married before, had no children. But when he looked around, you know, this man in his mid-50s, when he looked around for a wife, he wasn't looking for some young hot blonde, because that's not where he was in life. That wasn't what he was valuing. And that is true. You know, where you are determines what you need. And you have to approach that on a case-by-case basis. You know, there is not only one kind of woman who is wife material, because every man is different. He's going to need different things in different situations. Obviously, the ultimate goal would be a young man and a young woman who have kept themselves pure, get married, have children, die together of old age, you know, hundreds of years in the future. That would be, I mean, obviously the ultimate goal would be we would never have sinned and never have died. But your life does put certain limits on what is achievable and what is not just achievable, but also what is realistic.
Gareth Press thought we had a great point at some point. Don't know what it was.
You're welcome.
Yep, you're welcome. Hey, isn't this the guy you have on the same one that says principles don't win wars? That stuck with me since I heard it. I'm not familiar with that phrase, but I mean, it's true. I think it's one of those things, and I brought this up in relation to the war of northern aggression, is you can win a war and lose yourself in the process. And that is, so that would be my counter to principles don't win wars. Because sometimes you're kind of doing a kamikaze. You're killing yourself in order to kill the enemy. Right. And if you throw away what's worth fighting for just so you can live, like biologically, well, sometimes that's not worth fighting for, depending on what it is you have to give up. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's thinking too much into it, because when I hear wars, I'm thinking actual wars and not like metaphorical, like how Moscow thinks everything's a war and every psalm sung is a missile in the war. Anyways, I'm not familiar with that. If he looks like he's leaving, but not familiar with that phrase. John Carr says they would make excuses for such a man so long as he wasn't white. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, if it was, Tyrone got out of jail and, they'd be like, well, he's one of the good ones now. He's not like he used to be.
He's fully repented. If you don't want him to marry your daughter, you're just a racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I did know a black guy. He was the worship leader. Very talented guy, dude. Musically, he's just had a great voice, played piano amazing. His situation was he did something foolish when he was young, and he like tried to rob a bank or something. Why are we talking about robbing banks all the time now? It feels like everyone's got a robbing bank story these days. But he tried to rob a bank, obviously got caught, went to jail for a long time. And this woman that is his wife was like loyal. Like she was like, I'm sticking with him. And when he got out, she was there. And I mean, you can choose to do that. That's kind of my thing is like, obviously I'm not going to encourage people to do that. But if you know in your heart of hearts, like that is what you should be doing, is waiting it out for this guy or this woman. I mean, if you want to be George Costanza and try to pick up women at the women's prison, I mean, that's on you. But anyways, let's see. John Carter got another one. Never forget that by J.D. Hall's own statement, he is more morally repugnant than a prostitute. Is it because he's proud? Is that the issue? Or
that would be an interesting way of coming about it. I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to here, but I'll take your word on that.
I have to say, I hate, and I think I've talked about this before on the show, I hate when people will, like if you're in like a prayer circle, something like that, and you're anyway, people are going around giving their prayers and whatever, and someone's like, yeah, I really struggle with pride. Like, dude, shut up. That is the dumbest sin to try. What are you proud about? Because now you're just going to brag. Well, I struggle with pride because I'm the best at everything, and it just makes me proud. I need to be humble. Like, come on, dude. Like, what does that mean? Like with J.D. Hall's whole thing, like, what is a proud version? What is she proud about? Is she proud that she was able to block all the advances of all the hundreds of men who were trying to sleep with her? Like, is that what she's proud about? Because that seems like something you should have pride in.
Yeah, there are some things that you can be proud of that is not sinful.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a difference between sinful pride and godly pride.
Yeah. And of course, the one thing a Saiyan always has is his pride.
Yeah, so he says calling a redeemed woman a whore is more repugnant than hold on.
Yeah, you're getting blocked. You're getting blocked.
Get rid of this thing here. What did I do?
You made the whole thing go. What are we doing now?
Oh, here we go. Media assets.
I think it says not only. There you go. You got it.
For the fella at the beginning who said, man, these guys are super professional. Eat your words.
Yeah. Yeah.
He says, calling a redeemed woman a whore is not only more repugnant than a former prostitute, is likely more repugnant than a current one. Yeah. So,
I mean,
he called some guy's dead mother a whore. So by his own standard, he's worse than an OnlyFans.
I see.
Yeah. So interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
I don't know what this means. Got to go get some apothecary. Talk to you later. All right, bud. Well, enjoy the.
Have fun. Have a good night.
Yeah. I think.
Not sure what he's referring to there. But,
yeah. I think John Carter saying, yeah, that's where we were talking about robbing banks. Everyone's got a robbing bank story. I was talking about my great uncle Troy was the getaway driver in a bank robbery and he was apparently not very good at being a getaway driver because he did not get away. So he did some time in jail. And
You had one job. One
feel-
job.
you know what's funny though? Like, I feel like robbing a bank is such a, I almost want to say that's like an Andy Griffith type like crime. Like that feels so innocent to me. I don't know why bank robbing feels innocent to me. Like, there's just some crimes that aren't as like they're
serious,
old.
yeah.
They're old fashioned. Like, they're mythical.
There was we were having a discussion in the car driving around with my kids, and just got back from vacation, so did a lot of car talking, and we were talking about robbing banks for who knows what reason. And I said to my daughter, well, when you rob a bank, it's not like the bank runs out. So, it was in the context of her opening a bank account. So, she's got some money and she stashes it away, but her younger siblings like to get into her chest of drawers and pilfer her stuff and just make a mess of things. And she said, she's worried because her younger brother literally eats everything. So he's going to get in there and literally eat her money. And a little bit dramatic about it, but maybe she's not all wrong. I mean, he has done things like that before, swallowing pennies and stuff. But anyway, so I told her, well, we'll open you a bank account. And she said, well, I don't want to do that because if somebody robs the bank, I'll lose my money. And I explained to her, well, when somebody robs a bank, your money doesn't disappear. It's a fractional reserve system, and it's guaranteed by the government. The bank just gets more money, comes in on a money truck and replaces the lost money, and they keep your money on a ledger. So it's not like your money disappears, right? And then I said, well, ultimately, if you're robbing a bank, you're not robbing the people whose accounts are in the bank, right? You're robbing the government. And the government, nobody likes the government. So people have this idea about bank robbers that it's not that bad, right? Not that serious. But I said, ultimately, the government gets all of their money from who? Working people. So when you rob a bank, who are you actually robbing? You're robbing the working man. You're
robbing the Jews, bro.
I gotta get some of that back. This high interest loan, I'm gonna make my own back. But so I kind of explained to her, it's when you're doing that, what you're participating is antisocial behavior. You are harming society at large. And, some people might say that's a bit of a socialist kind of perspective to have. But really, ultimately, when you rob a bank, what you're doing is you are harming society. You are harming the milieu, the hoi polloi. You are harming everybody just a little bit, but you're not harming anybody in particular very much, which is why I think people don't see it as a very evil crime. When Bonnie and Clyde were running across the southern United States, there was a time when they were in Southeast Texas, and Bonnie and Clyde were pretty well known for robbing banks, but they also would just seemingly randomly kill people. So they weren't some of your more prototypical bank robbers, the sympathetic bank robbers. But I had a great aunt who, according to story, and family legends are always hard to determine what's true and what's not. But according to family legends, she got a ride from Bonnie and Clyde. Didn't know who they were, came over the wireless on the radio. Hey, Bonnie and Clyde are in town. Everybody shelter in place. And she's at work walking home. So she has no idea this happens. Bonnie and Clyde hit the town, rob a bank. And then here's my great aunt walking home, and car pulls up, says, hey, do you need a ride? She says, yeah, thanks. Hops in. They chat with her, drop her off at the front door and leave. Then she walks in the door and they're like, we're supposed to be sheltering in place. You're not supposed to be taking rides from strangers. Who was that? And she's like, oh, well, just a guy and a girl. I didn't ask their name. They didn't ask mine. And they, after looking into it, they're like, yeah, that was the car they were in. She hitched a ride with Bonnie and Clyde. Yeah. So
pretty cool.
All
See,
right.
John Carter highly recommends the film The Lady Killers from 1955 on the subject of the effects of robbery. And he follows up with,
Okay.
under no circumstances should you watch the 2000s film with the same name. That was the first, when you said The Lady Killers, I'm like, I don't know, man.
I grew up reading newspaper comics, and one of the characters in Beatles, right, was the guy named Killer, right? And the reason he was called Killer is because he was a lady killer. He was a ladies' man, right? He was always with a new girl, and so I can imagine that the 2000s film of the same name is a very different kind of a movie. All right, let me check on the Rumble side. Nope, there are no chats on the Rumble.
Let me say one thing before we close out.
Mhm.
We had a couple weeks back, we had my buddy Drew Davis, and he runs Vibe SEO.
Mhm.
So this is kind of a sponsorship type situation, but basically, if you are interested in search engine optimization, if you go to, I'm looking for vibeseo.com, so it's VIBESEO.com, you can get their services and they will put you on the front page of Google, not in the advertisement spots that people skip over because those are paid ads, but actually at the front page of the search results. Tell them that Sean sent you, and I will get some kickback from that. And I'm not ashamed to say that. So you would be supporting, you would be supporting the show if you go to vibeseo.com and get yourself signed up for that. And we will, so it's kind of a sponsorship, I guess. Like if you say it the right way, like go to vibeseo.com, tell them Sean sent you and get whatever off, or I don't know. But that's basically what's going on. It is pretty cool to see.
Not receive a discount, but Sean will get some sort of kickback.
Yes, I will receive money.
His buddy will probably take him out for barbecue.
Well, I'm not going to say the exact amount, but
oh, nice.
Yeah, but I do. I need to start putting money into the show because Jeff has already sunk himself some amount of money, some undisclosed amount. But yeah, vibeseo.com. And if you're curious about that, we did talk with the owner of the company, Drew Davis. We had him on a couple weeks ago. So
yeah, go and watch that one. It's a fantastic show. And as far as I know, some people might be curious. We've mentioned Streamlabs before. I do not know what is going on with Streamlabs. I am just about ready to drop them like a rock. Because
let's go to OnlyFans, bro.
Yeah, is that what we should do?
Yeah.
But I do not know why, but for some reason our Subscribe Star page just will not get verified. They have sent me an email saying that hey, you're ready to go. I have sent 2 emails back to them saying, hey, despite the fact that you say we're good to go, when you show up, this is what you see. This profile is under review. Please wait, please wait, please wait. I have sent emails to them, and I've gotten emails back from them saying, oh, yeah, your profile should be good to go. But if you try to donate to our page, you will not be allowed to. So I don't know what is their problem. But if you either have... if any of you have the inside scoop on Subscribe Star, if you know somebody over there, ask them why they're treating me so bad. And then if you have a suggestion for another company that we could use instead, maybe suggest that and we'll look into it, because there are a lot of good things with Subscribe Star. The reasons why I want to use them, they seem to be good people. They haven't cheated right-wing content creators out of their money. So I would like to support that, unlike Patreon, who literally stole thousands of dollars that they've never returned from multiple different creators just because they knew they could get away with it, and they have. So I don't want to use leftists. I want to use good people, but good people don't seem to be able to get their act together.
Yes.
Come on,
Bro,
guys.
Awful.
Why the children of this world are more
Yeah.
more savvy than the children of God for some reason.
I'm about to switch sides, bro.
Yeah. Change teams. Halfway through the match, we're losing. I'm switching sides.
Yeah.
But anywho, that is the situation as it is. Well, it has been quite the show, not quite 3 hours, but we thank everybody who's been along for the ride. It has been a fantastic time. We thank you to John for coming on. We appreciate you spending your time with us. And if y'all are not familiar with John Moody, look up his books. Look him up on YouTube. You can find some of his talks. Follow him on Twitter. The guy is very insightful. He's extremely intelligent, and he runs in all our same circles. I mean, he and Mr. Dow used to go to church together. They're good friends. So anyhow, thank you for sticking along till the end of the show. We appreciate all that y'all do in watching and sharing. I haven't said this before, but maybe I should get in the habit of saying it. If you like this show, give it a thumbs up on whatever platform you're on. Share it with your friends. Send the link to your liberal aunt and give her a heart attack. But anyway, we hope that y'all have a wonderful night, and farewell.